Chapter 163. 147. Conspiracy. Governor Jehudi-Hotep's legs softened, and he almost fell back into his chair. Aman was truly ruthless this time. He had actually accused him of being the mastermind behind the assassination, and even accused all the lords who had complained in the hall. Everyone was shocked and angry, but they all looked at the holy lady with pleading eyes. How would she respond? Maria stood up with a sullen expression and took out her staff. The city's security will be handled by the governor and will be handled according to the laws of the empire. Isis's blessing ceremony is imminent, so we cannot slack off. Everyone, hurry up and handle your duties. The temple of Isis also has the responsibility of supervision. Gabriel, Burke, you two will represent the temple and go to the governor's office to listen in. There is no need to interfere with the case, just make sure it is handled according to the law. After saying this, the holy lady retreated to the back of the hall with her staff. The meaning behind her words was clear. This matter was not under her jurisdiction, but she would send someone to keep an eye on it. Governor Jehudi-Hotep should hurry up and handle this matter. It would be a grave sin if he disturbed Isis's blessing ceremony. Governor Jehudi-Hotep rushed back to the governor's office with a group of people. Aman was sitting in the hall with a sword in his hand. In front of him was a broken table that had been kicked, and its contents were scattered all over the floor. Governor Jehudi-Hotep didn't dare to step forward. Instead, High Priest Burke frowned and asked, Aman, as a supreme general of the empire, you should know the rules of etiquette. Why did you rush into the governor's office with a weapon in your hand? Among the 3 high priests of the Temple of Isis, George had the best relationship with Aman. Burke, who did not participate in the war on the front lines, was the representative of the clergy group before the Holy Lady ascended the throne. He was the most hostile to Aman. Maria had sent Burke and Gabriel this time to show that she had no intentions of favoritism. Aman coldly replied, "It is His Majesty Pharaoh's permission to carry a sword. Even in His Majesty's carriage, I carry a sword with me, let alone in the governor's office." Everyone was stunned. The general was telling the truth. In order to commend Aman's meritorious service, Lazith too allowed the general to accompany him with his sword. He could even carry a sword by Pharaoh's side, let alone in the city-state's magistrate's office. Burke's questioning was unreasonable. John held back his laughter and reminded him, "Great general, you're here to complain. You should at least give up the seat of the city lord, right?" Aman stood up and returned his sword to its sheath. He nodded and said, "Thank you for the reminder. I was impolite. Just because of a moment of anger, I even broke the city lord's table. I will definitely compensate you later. Please take a seat, city lord." After everyone sat down, they began to deal with Aman's accusations. Things had already gotten so out of hand that everyone wanted to back down, especially City Lord Jehudi-Hotep, who wanted to keep the peace. In fact, the truth of the matter was very clear. Everyone's testimony was there, and there were no contradictions or doubts. City Lord Jehudi-Hotep implored, "Great general, this is just a misunderstanding caused by jealousy in a brothel. It can't be any clearer. You've already caused such a huge ruckus. You can teach anyone you want a lesson and vent your anger. The ceremony of blessing goddess Isis is just around the corner, so I think we should just forget about it. You did not suffer any losses anyway. I will get the other lords to apologize to you later." Aman shook his head. "We can't do this. It won't be good if word of this gets out. I fought over a girl in a brothel, arrested so many people, and even tore down the magistrate's office. This is too outrageous. How can we keep the peace? I will not use my authority to oppress others. I only request that we deal with them according to the laws of the empire. Let's first convict them." City Lord Jehudi-Hotep asked with a bitter face, "How are we going to convict them?" Gabriel snorted coldly, "How should we convict them? If the Supreme General is guilty, then convict him. The same goes for Sabaf and the others." City Lord Jehudi-Hotep turned to Gabriel and asked, "Do you think the Supreme General is guilty?" Gabriel replied with a straight face, "City Lord Jehudi-Hotep should not be asking me. I am only a supervisor, not a judge." Aman took over the conversation and said, "Since that's the case, let's start with me. Lord Jehudi-Hotep, Can I go to the brothel to drink and enjoy the music and dance? City Lord Jehudi Hotep, yes. Aman, if I sit there, I will only give out more money. Did I offend anyone? City Lord Jehudi Hotep, no. Aman, if I am not on official business and without permission, should I carry a weapon when I go out at night? Although I have the special permission of the pharaoh, I did not carry a sword in the brothel. City Lord Jehudi Hotep, you should not. Aman, I was drinking, and someone with a sharp weapon broke into my room. Is that what happened? City Lord Jehudi Hotep, it is like this. This is all a misunderstanding and has nothing to do with you. It was Sabaf who offended you because of a girl. Aman, I don't want to talk about any misunderstanding with you. If you were sitting there drinking and someone broke in with a sharp weapon, would you say that he was not an assassin? John attacked and caught him. Is there anything wrong with that? City Lord Jehudi Hotep, of course there is nothing wrong with that. Lord Sabaf should not have done this, but you can't be so sure that he intentionally tried to assassinate me. Aman, you can't say that I was not the one who invited him in. Everyone's testimony is clear. Did he point his sword at me and say that I am courting death? I believe that City Lord Jehudi Hotep should understand what death means. If this is not an assassination, what else can be considered an assassination? Do you want me to be killed by him before the verdict can be reached? City Lord Jehudi Hotep, Supreme General, please calm down. I have already asked clearly that bastard Sabaf does not know you. This is all a misunderstanding. Aman snorted coldly. I have publicly attended various official ceremonies in Montefiore, and as the deputy head of the city, he actually said that he does not know me. Do you believe that? Even if he does not know me, is it not my fault that he tried to assassinate me? City Lord Jehudi Hotep, but why would Sabaf want to assassinate you? That doesn't make sense. Aman laughed. Lord Jehudi Hotep has already investigated the matter. It was all because of a girl in the brothel who was jealous. Jehudi Hotep, who was wiping his sweat, finally heaved a sigh of relief. It was just a small matter of a girl in the brothel. Why did Supreme General make such a big deal out of it? Aman's face turned stern again. Small matter? It's true that he was jealous, but the evidence of him trying to assassinate me is irrefutable. How can I not punish him for something as serious as trying to assassinate the Supreme General just because of a small matter of a girl in the brothel? If the matter gets any bigger, who knows what kind of disaster this person will bring? John, who was standing at the side, finally spoke up. Lord Jehudi Hotep, I have asked all the questions that need to be asked, and the evidence is conclusive. The deputy head of the finance department of Montefiore, Sabaf, dared to assassinate the Supreme General just because of a girl in the brothel. He is the main culprit, and the other armed assailants are his accomplices. What is your motive for refusing to convict him? Could it be that Sabaf had planned this from the start? Or could it be that one of the lords here is the mastermind? Jehudi Hotep finally could not hold on any longer and looked around for help. Even though the lords present were all furious when they complained in the morning, they did not say anything now. If Aman were to insist on pursuing the matter according to the law, this would be the result, and it would depend on whether the Supreme General was willing to relent. Jehudi Hotep cursed them in his heart before standing up helplessly and walking to Aman's side. He whispered into his ear, Supreme General, if you insist on doing this, things will not be easy. Actually, we all know that this is a misunderstanding, and it is right for you to teach them a lesson, but you have to know when to stop. Not to mention, Lord Sabaf is the nephew of the Prime Minister. Aman suddenly raised his voice. What? Prime Minister Joseph? Does this matter have anything to do with the Prime Minister? Please speak louder, I can't hear you clearly. Jehudi Hotep was shocked, and his face turned red as he quickly stepped back and waved his hands. Supreme General, please don't say anything. I did not say that the Prime Minister is related to this matter, but everyone here knows that Sabaf is the Prime Minister's nephew. I am just reminding you out of goodwill. Aman stood up and pointed at John. Thank you for your kind intentions, Lord Jehudi Hotep. But does this have anything to do with Sabaf's assassination? Look at this general, he risked his life on the battlefield and was punished for his carelessness. With his uncle as the Prime Minister, do you think he can match up to Lord John's achievements? For example, Sabaf was the prime minister's nephew, and it was indeed difficult to deal with him. However, this was a private discussion and could not be brought out in the open. Aman might as well make it clear. Who would dare to say that they could not deal with Sabaf? Even Prime Minister Joseph could not make such a declaration. Unless Jehudi Hotep openly declared that he wanted to bend the law, there was no room for negotiation. Aman could tell that Jehudi Hotep was in a difficult position, and he smiled at everyone. So all of you know that Sabaf is the Prime Minister's nephew. In that case, I shall not make things difficult for all of you. Regarding this matter, please send an official letter to the Pharaoh, the Prime Minister, and the military to ask for instructions on how to deal with it. After saying that, Aman took out a scroll of documents and handed it to Jehudi Hotep. He had already written it before coming here, and the contents were as follows: blessed by the great god Horus, the protector of Upper and Lower Egypt, the defender of the empire, the successor of the glory of Anare, the supreme general Alahesu Messiah Hove'enri Mountain, whose name is spread far and wide, has recently left his territory for the city of Memphis to participate in the blessing of the goddess Isis. During the banquet in the city, an assassin broke into the city with a sword. After investigation, the main culprit was Sabaf, the deputy head of the city's finance department, and there were dozens of accomplices. The facts of the matter and the records of the interrogation were clear and the evidence was conclusive. Sabaf was the nephew of Prime Minister Joseph, and there were rumors that the Prime Minister was involved in this matter. The Prime Minister is a role model for the officials, so how could he be involved in this matter? I asked my nephew how to deal with this matter. Ever since I returned to the empire with my army, I have rarely been able to enjoy the pleasures of the countryside. However, there are people who are jealous of the rewards I received from the empire and His Majesty Pharaoh. Someone tried to assassinate me during the banquet. Should I not pursue this matter? I sent my personal guards to apprehend the assassin, but a group of nobles took the opportunity to accuse me of allowing people to commit murder. What is the reason for this? Please advise His Majesty Pharaoh. From Montefiore to Thebes, the capital of the Igut, it would take nearly a month to sail upstream along the Nile River. If one rode a horse along the riverbank, it would take at least 5 to 6 days. This was only done for urgent documents. Of course, the fastest speed would be by flying shuttle, which would take 2 days. If one disregarded fatigue and used a flying scroll, the fastest speed would be more than a day. The Supreme General was very anxious. The ceremony of Isis's blessing would be held in 5 days, and this matter had to be settled before the ceremony. This was also an order from the Holy Lady. Thus, Aman's request for instructions was sent to Thebes at the fastest speed possible. Along with the letter was a sword with the family emblem, a detailed record of the investigation of this matter, and another document. Not only did it contain the names of the main culprit and the accomplices, it also included the names of the nobles who had gone to the governor's residence to accuse Aman. The sword belonged to Sabaf, and it was left in the hall where Aman was drinking. The family emblem was on the hilt, and it was the most important piece of evidence. Aman purposely asked the messenger to bring the sword to Prime Minister Yusuf of the empire. Aman's request was not a secret letter, but a public document, which shocked everyone. As soon as the messenger left, everyone knew the result. No one would protect Sabaf anymore, and this deputy director of the finance department would definitely be severely punished, and the people involved would not be able to escape responsibility. The severity of the punishment would depend on Aman, because the Supreme General had already made this matter public, and Pharaoh would definitely give him face. This document was sent to the pharaohs of Igut, Lazith II, Prime Minister Joseph, and the military, which was equivalent to making it public among the ministers of Igut. The Prime Minister was furious, but he could not say anything to Aman, and could only scold his nephew for publicly declaring that Sabaf's actions were a disgrace to the family. Before Pharaoh could say anything, the Prime Minister took the initiative to request Pharaoh to severely punish Sabaf and the people related to him. Such actions did not match their noble status, and it was unforgivable. No matter how many schemes the Prime Minister had done in the dark, this matter had already been laid out on the table, and he had no choice but to do so. Some of the ministers of Igut were on good terms with Aman, while others did not know Aman and were just bystanders. Many of them could not help but admire the prime minister and thought that he had offended the wrong person. Aman was a supreme general who had fought with real swords and spears, and he would not play tricks with the prime minister. This was a slap to the face from Montefiore all the way back to Thebes. Many people thought that the supreme general Aman wanted to punish Sabaf because the prime minister had secretly encouraged his henchmen to impeach John, which was actually a slap to Aman's face. Since the prime minister wanted to punish John, Aman wanted to punish his nephew, Sabaf. While Prime Minister Joseph put on a pained expression in front of the ministers, Pharaoh Lazith too laughed when he saw Aman's document. He smiled and said, "Don't be sad, Prime Minister. It's normal for there to be a few scum in such a large family. I'm very pleased with your attitude, and this matter must be pursued strictly. Sabaf is the main culprit, and according to the law, he should be punished severely. As for the others, I think it's a misunderstanding, and no one is targeting the Supreme General. It's understandable that the Supreme General is angry. This document has impeached all of them, and they have to be dealt with. Sabaf will be demoted to a commoner, and will no longer be a member of the Prime Minister's noble family. If Supreme General Aman wants to punish them further, as long as it doesn't violate the law, he will do as he pleases. As for the others involved, those who had weapons in their hands will be demoted by 1 rank or fined. Those who gathered to falsely accuse the Supreme General will have to pay a fine to apologize to the Supreme General. As for the exact amount, it will depend on whether the Supreme General is satisfied with it. The city of Montefiore will be responsible for it. Pharaoh's order was to punish Sabaf severely, and the rest of the accomplices would be given a lighter sentence. Lazith too could see that Sabaf's accomplices did not know anything at the time, and it was just a common case of brawling and carrying weapons in the middle of the night, which was against the law of the city. But due to Ank's timely handling of the matter, there were no serious consequences. If they were to be treated as assassinations, it would implicate too many people. As for those who went to the governor's office and the shrine to complain, Pharaoh reprimanded them, and the punishment was very interesting. They were asked to pay a large sum of money to the Supreme General as an apology. Anyway, it was a generous reward, and Pharaoh did not have to pay out of his own pocket, which was enough to give Aman face. Pharaoh also praised John and Ankh in the order, praising them for their loyalty. Although it was only a verbal praise, and there was no actual reward, it meant that not only did they break Sabaf's legs for nothing, but they also did a good job and deserved it. As the Supreme General of the Empire, Aman had contributed greatly to the empire, and the more they feared him, the more they had to give him face on the surface. Pharaoh heaved a sigh of relief when the Supreme General went to a brothel to cause trouble, and even ordered his personal guards to injure the officials of the city. If Aman knew how to endure at such a young age and never made any mistakes, then that would be truly terrifying. The messenger was extremely fast, and the city of Montefiore received Pharaoh's order 3 days later, as well as a message from the Prime Minister demanding that the culprits be punished. All the culprits were already in prison, and Jehudi-Hotep did not dare to delay any further. He immediately invited Aman to the governor's office and brought all the relevant personnel over to be dealt with on the spot. According to the Igut decrees, if a noble committed a crime, unless it was treason, they could be punished with their titles depending on the severity of the crime. Sabaf was dismissed, stripped of all his titles, stripped of his noble status, and demoted to a commoner. This was a rather heavy punishment. Speaking of which, it was just a case of drawing a sword in a fit of anger, but the poor bastard did not expect to cause such a huge commotion. Pharaoh's order also specifically mentioned that if Aman felt that he was not satisfied, as long as he did not violate the empire's decrees, he could add to the punishment. Governor Jehudi-Hotep immediately asked, "Supreme General, do you want to add to the punishment?" Aman replied in a deep voice, "Since he has been demoted to a commoner, I just want to give him a chance to redeem himself by sending Sabaf to the NRA Legion to guard the borders. Then, I will assign him to the unit that corresponds to his birthplace." "Governor, does this violate the empire's decrees?" Governor Jehudi-Hotep nodded. "Of course not. I think he should be thanking Supreme General." Chapter 164. Translator, Exodus Tales Editor. Exodus Tales. After the main culprit was dealt with, Governor Jehudi Hotep asked. Supreme General, His Majesty has decreed that they should be demoted by 1 rank or fined accordingly. What do you think? Aman spread his hands and said, I have no objections. Let them make their own choice. Governor Jehudi Hotep smiled bitterly. Thank you for your leniency, Supreme General. As for those who accused you due to a misunderstanding, His Majesty has ordered them to compensate with a large sum of money. How much do you think is appropriate? Aman smiled. I don't want to extort anyone. As for the specific amount, I will leave it to you. I won't complain about too much or too little. Thank you for your hard work. This sum of money will be divided into 3 portions. I will take 1 portion and the other 2 will be given to John and Ankh. This is my gratitude as well as a reward from His Majesty Pharaoh. Lazif too only praised the 2 generals with his mouth but not with any tangible benefits. Aman, however, turned the sum of money into 3 and rewarded Ankh and John handsomely. Governor Jehudi Hotep let out a long sigh and said, This matter is finally settled. The day after tomorrow is Isis's blessing ceremony. It has finally been completed. Gabriel, who was listening by the side, spoke up. Lady Holy Maiden has ordered that after this matter is settled, everyone involved is to gather at the temple for a meeting. She wants to ask about the results. Aman stood up as if he wanted to say something, but after hearing Gabriel's words, he hesitated. He winked at John and followed everyone to the temple to pay his respects to Lady Holy Maiden. In the noisy meeting hall, Lady Holy Maiden inquired about His Majesty Pharaoh's decree and Governor Jehudi Hotep's actions. She nodded her head in satisfaction and consoled Aman. She praised Jehudi Hotep and expressed her sympathy for his hard work over the past few days. Finally, she spoke to Aman, Supreme General, it is rare for you to come to Montefiore, yet you encountered such a situation. Please do not take it to heart. The day after tomorrow is Isis's blessing ceremony. This will be the 2nd time you are participating in this ceremony. 2 years ago, you were an honorary knight of the temple. Today, you have become a Supreme General. How do you feel about revisiting an old place? Aman bowed and said, This is all thanks to Lady Holy Maiden's guidance, and also thanks to Sir Gabriel for saving my life in the past. Otherwise, how could Aman be where he is today? I have a request, and I hope the Holy Queen will grant it. Maria asked, What request does the Supreme General have? Aman, in this ceremony, I want to wear the armor of an honorable warrior, still hold the spear like back then, stand in the position of the past, guard the square for the Holy Queen, and do my part for the city of Montefiore. Everyone was shocked. The general did not want to sit on the viewing platform in front of the Divine Hall to participate in the ceremony. Instead, he stood on duty in the square with a spear in his hand, just like the warrior of the Divine Hall 2 years ago, guarding the square to maintain the order of the people. By doing so, Aman was giving face to the temple of Isis and Montefiore. Someone was about to dissuade him, but Maria smiled and said, All right, I promise you. The Supreme General does not forget his roots and is respected by the whole country. He is humble and does not become arrogant because of his achievements. He is worthy of respect. Everyone reacted upon hearing this and expressed their admiration towards Aman. Aman smiled and said, Lady Holy Maiden, there is actually one more thing that I wanted to talk about in the governor's office, but since there is an opportunity here, let's talk about it here. A noble general wants to sue the commoner Sabaf. Governor Jehudi Hotep was taken aback and quickly said, Supreme General, isn't this matter already settled? Aman said lightly, The matter of Sabaf's assassination is settled, but this is another matter. It is not me who wants to sue him, it is General John who wants to sue him. The complaint has already been written, and as for what exactly is going on, you can take a look at it first. Should we talk about it here or back to the governor's office? Maria frowned slightly. Why does General John want to sue Sabaf? Let me take a look at the complaint first. John took out a scroll from his bosom, and Gabriel took it and passed it to the Holy Maiden. Maria flipped through it, and her brows gradually furrowed. She said with a sullen expression, Pass it to everyone. The Holy Queen actually wanted all the officials present to read it. Everyone took it and passed it around. Their faces became very ugly, some people even showed relieved expressions. This was a complaint by John against Sabaf, accusing him of sending ruffians to cause trouble at the farm after Mahu's death. He seized Mahu's farm, and his accomplice, Lideros, forcibly took Mahu's wife. Mahu's father died in prison, and his wife committed suicide by jumping into a river. Mahu was once a squad leader under John, and today he wanted to seek justice for his subordinates and the soldiers who sacrificed their lives at the front lines. Aman made a big deal out of a small incident in the brothel. At first, people thought that the Supreme General was fighting over a girl. But when they saw that the situation was not right, they thought that Aman was taking the opportunity to show his power and retaliate against the Prime Minister. Only now did they realize that Aman did not let Sabaf off because he wanted to avenge the soldiers who died at the front lines. If this matter were to be spread out, not only would it not damage Aman's reputation, it would also increase his prestige. The matter was still the same, but the meaning had changed. When everyone finished reading, Maria sighed softly. "General John, your investigation is very detailed, and the facts are clear. The suffering of Mahu's family is pitiful, but according to the laws of the city, this case will not be overturned." The Holy Envy was telling the truth. This case could not be overturned because the most crucial evidence was missing. Lideros was the one who planned this incident, and he was the one who bought the farm from Mahu's widow at a low price. He was also the one who coerced Mahu's widow into marrying him, but Lideros was already dead, and Mahu's widow committed suicide. As for Sabaf's assassination, the facts were clear. Old Mahu had indeed gathered a group of people with weapons and barged into Sabaf's territory. They rushed to the carriage of Sabaf and Lideros and stabbed Sabaf's horse. Unless they could find out who planned this and find the culprit who stabbed the horse to confess that it was all Sabaf's doing, they would not be able to overturn the case. Unfortunately, John could not find any evidence. Some of the hooligans had long disappeared, and this incident was planned by Lideros, so there was no evidence left. Old Mahu did not have the intention to assassinate Sabaf, just like how Sabaf did not have the intention to assassinate Aman. But in the face of evidence and facts, the case could only be decided this way. Of course, Aman was clear about this, otherwise he would not have waited until now to bring out the complaint. He got up and bowed. "Holy Envy, you are right. But I do not ask for results, I only ask for an open investigation. According to the laws of the Empire of Igut, if a noble accuses a commoner, the city's Justice Department must accept the case and conduct an open trial, allowing the commoners to sit in." His goal was not to overturn the case, but to make it public. Aman accused Sabaf of assassinating Sabaf to ruin his reputation, and now he wanted John to accuse Sabaf and conduct an open trial to ruin Sabaf's reputation. Making this matter public was also beneficial to Aman and John. At the very least, people would know why the Supreme General wanted to create such a ruckus in Montefiore. Maria asked curiously, "Supreme General, you and General John have been in the territory all this time, how did you find out about this matter? And when did you go to the farm to investigate?" Aman answered honestly, "On the second day after John injured Sabaf, everyone thought that I had brought the girl out of the city to play. In fact, the girl was Mahu's sister. Mahu was a hero who died on the battlefield, but his family was destroyed, and his only surviving relative ended up in that kind of place. How could I not investigate this? John and I brought Mahu's sister to the farm to investigate this matter." Aman was not a fool, and he did not mention the matter of Misfi assassinating Lideros, but revealed the girl's identity. Governor Jehudi Hotep held the complaint and said with a bitter expression, "Supreme General, Sabaf's legs were broken, and he was sent to serve in the NRA Legion according to your wishes. You have already punished him. Besides, Lady Holy Queen has also said that this case cannot be overturned. The day after tomorrow is the blessing ceremony of Isis, so can we not complicate matters?" Aman, who was kneeling on the ground, stood up and asked with his hands behind his back, "My lords, so you have not forgotten that the day after tomorrow is the blessing ceremony of Isis. I would like to ask, what is a blessing? What is a blessing?" No one dared to answer without permission, so they all looked up at the Holy Queen. Maria stared at Aman blankly for a moment, just like when they stared into each other's eyes. Then she slowly replied, "In the blessing of Isis, The blessing of Isis is performed to eliminate pain, wash away fatigue, and give people confidence, strength, and courage. It is a symbol of the goddess' love and mercy. But a true blessing is not just a ceremony. When one's heart is filled with power, the goddess will not close her eyes to her people. She will bear witness to sin and kindness, and let love and honesty meet, and justice and peace meet. The fertility of the earth will accompany the peace of the soul, washing away the unclean soul. It is a blessing, but it is also a test, and that is the true blessing. Supreme General's reminder is right. If we delay today's accusation because of the blessing ceremony, how can we talk about blessing? Governor, accept the case according to the rules and conduct a public trial today. Do not change the way this case should be handled because of the blessing ceremony. If the trial cannot be completed by tomorrow, continue after the blessing ceremony and make an announcement according to General Amon's wishes. The matter was decided. On the day before the blessing ceremony of Isis, the city's Justice Department accepted the case of John's accusation against Sabaf and made an announcement that the citizens of the city were allowed to attend the trial. Of course, the trial required a process, and it would take more than a day or two to bring the relevant people to the government for interrogation. The results would only be out after the blessing ceremony. The announcement was made, and the contents of John's accusation were made public, but the trial did not actually proceed. That was because on that night, Sabaf, who had lost all his standing and reputation, committed suicide. His death was not surprising, and Amon had long expected this outcome. Sabaf had already been stripped of his noble status and became a commoner. Once his crimes were made public, sending him to serve in the NRA Legion would only result in a worse death. How Sabaf died was no longer important. When John presented the accusation in public, his fate was already decided. When Maria gave the order, the matter was settled, and the lords took their leave. However, the Holy Maiden asked Amon to stay, as she had something to ask the Supreme General in private, and sent everyone else away. After the blessing ceremony, Amon would return to his territory, and the two of them did not know when they would have the opportunity to meet again. Maria sat there and looked at Amon, as if there were thousands of words in her eyes. Amon also looked at her, and after a long time, the sky outside the window gradually darkened, and it was time for the Supreme General to take his leave. Amon then said softly, "Don't you have something to ask me? I can see that you have something to say. Speak." Maria's words startled Amon. "The girl who sang and danced for you that night was the one who killed Lederos, wasn't she?" Amon was slightly startled and then sighed, "Nothing can be hidden from your eyes. I did not mention this at all, but you thought of it. Yes, she killed Lederos. Madam, Holy Envy wouldn't punish this poor girl, right? There is no evidence in this case." Maria said meaningfully, "If I wanted to pursue the matter, I would not have mentioned it to you alone. Amon, that girl is known as the Flower of Montefiore. She must be very beautiful, right?" This was the first time Amon spoke in front of Maria, and he actually stuttered a little. She is very beautiful, I can't deny that. But I think that true beauty is bathed in the light of Goddess Isis." There was a smile in Maria's eyes, but there was also a trace of undetectable regret. She lowered her eyes and whispered, "You have to be kind to her. Her experience is very pitiful, and her behavior is also very admirable. She is a rare woman. Perhaps God sent her to your side. This is the true fate of the world." Amon smiled. "It's really the gods who sent her to my side. I just had to meet her, and so many things have happened." Maria lowered her eyes, but she could still feel that there was something wrong with Amon's eyes. She raised her head and asked, "Why are you looking at me like that? What a strange smile. Am I wrong? You've alarmed the entire empire for a girl. What will happen to that orphan girl? Shouldn't you treat her well in the future? My Supreme General." Amon was still smiling. "Since the Holy Queen said so, of course I have to treat this girl well. I will ransom her and arrange everything." Maria frowned slightly. "This is what you should do. Why are you still smiling like this?" Amon finally laughed out loud. "This girl is called Miss Vi, a 4th-level warrior. If the Supreme Warrior Gabriel saw her, he would definitely like her very much. It is not easy for a girl to have such an achievement. You are one of the people I admire the most. Nothing can be hidden from your eyes, but there is something so obvious that you did not see. Maria asked curiously, "What is it? I don't understand what you mean." Amon replied, "I didn't say, and you have never seen her before, but you guessed that she is the murderer of Laderos. But General John likes her, very much. Such an obvious thing, and you actually did not see it. I will ask Miss Phi for her opinion, and if she is willing, then let them be together." Maria's expression was actually a little embarrassed. "Oh, so that's what happened. The person who went to the farm to investigate was John, and the person who filed the official complaint was also John." When he mentioned that girl, General John's expression was indeed, "I should have seen it, but I just didn't pay attention. You are very considerate for your subordinates and people, but you should also think more about yourself." Amon stopped smiling and said, "When it is time to think, I will think about it. You also have to take care of yourself." The next day, Amon sent someone to the brothel to redeem Miss Phi. The Supreme General placed great importance on this matter, and the person he sent was the captain of his guards, the Supreme Warrior General John. Unexpectedly, someone reacted faster than Hardadef. When Hardadef arrived, there were already 3 groups of people rushing to the brothel to ransom Miss Phi, and all of them had powerful backgrounds. They were the governor of the city, Jehudi Hotep, the emissary sent by Ankh, the chief warrior of the Shrine of Light, and the rich merchant Sehather himself, an official in charge of the resources department. The owner of the brothel, Dylan, was frightened by this situation. Originally, he could have agreed to redeem Miss Phi, but if he agreed to any one of them, he would definitely offend the other 2. When John arrived, Sayo was still arguing with the other 2. He was very determined to redeem Miss Phi no matter how high the price was. Hardadef was also taken aback by the scene, but this general was not stupid. He immediately understood what was going on when he saw Sehather and asked, "Lord Sehather, are you here to redeem Miss Phi because you want to do Supreme General a favor?" Sayo saw John and came over to greet him warmly. Upon hearing the question, he quickly replied, "Yes, I intend to send Miss Phi to the Supreme General's residence." John turned to the other 2 and said, "Go back and ask Mayor Jiatujan and Lord Ankh, if they want to redeem Miss Phi, do they also want to send her to the Supreme General? If that's the case, there's no need for that. Help me thank the 2 lords for their good intentions. The Supreme General has sent me to redeem Miss Phi." So that's the case. This time, there was nothing more to argue about, and the 2 messengers left. Sayo grabbed John's hand and asked, "The Supreme General sent you to redeem Miss Phi. I can't come here for nothing, you must give me some face. I will pay for the ransom, use my carriage to send Miss Phi to the Supreme General's residence." John laughed. "There's no need for the carriage, Miss Phi is in the Supreme General's residence, I'm just here to greet her. As for the money," the owner of the brothel, Dylan, quickly interrupted, "Miss Phi doesn't owe us money." John turned his head and glared at him. "You're the one who said that Miss Phi doesn't owe us money, don't say that I used the Supreme General's authority to oppress her." Dylan nodded. "Of course she doesn't owe us money, she has earned quite a lot of money for us in the past half a year. My lord said that if the Supreme General comes to redeem Miss Phi, it should be the money that Miss Phi earned, we have to return it to her." Dylan was only the owner of this brothel, and this brothel was the property of a great noble in Montefiore, which was also the my lord that Dylan mentioned. John came to redeem Miss Phi, but all he did was to greet her, and not only did he not spend any money, he even took away a large sum of money. Sayo still refused to leave and said to John, "Let me send you back, I'll hold the horse for you." John was both annoyed and amused. "I walked here." Chapter 165. 149. Horus with the broken wing. The 2 of them had a close relationship. Back then, John was the frontline commander of the NRA Legion, while Sayo was the logistics officer. They could be considered comrades who had fought on the front lines together. John had no choice but to bring Sayo back to pay his respects to the Supreme General. When Amon saw Sayo, he was overjoyed and laughed. "Why have you put on weight again? You can't live like a prince all day, you have to exercise and work hard. Back then, you were a very diligent merchant. If you didn't personally cross the desert to collect debts, we wouldn't have known each other. Sayo bowed and said, because I worked day and night during the war, I was so tired that I was tanned and skinny. When I came back, my family was very sad to see me and advised me to rest well. In the end, I overnourished myself and became even fatter than before. John kicked him lightly. You call that working day and night? Amon then asked John, how's the matter going? John replied, it's done. Amon nodded, go and invite Ms. Fai here, I have something to say. Ms. Fai came to the front hall and knelt to Amon as soon as she entered. Supreme General, I don't know how to express my gratitude. You and General John not only punished the sinners, but also made the matter public. This is a wish that I swore in front of the gods to fulfill at the cost of my life. It seems like the legends are true, you have received the blessings of the gods and have the glory of the gods in the world. Amon hurriedly gestured for John to help her up and sighed, Miss, your words make me very ashamed. Mahu was a brave warrior who fought with me. He gave up his life on the battlefield, but we couldn't protect his family. By the time we found out about it, it was too late. If you must thank someone, thank General John. He was the one who went to the farm to investigate, and he was also the one who filed the official complaint to the city. Miss Fai was about to kneel down to John again. John was holding on to her elbow. He hurriedly stopped her, looking like he was going to hug her. His face was a little red. Seeing this, Amon asked again, Miss Fai, John has redeemed your slave contract today, and your revenge has been avenged. What are your plans from now on? Tears welled up in Miss Fai's eyes. I thought that my fate was to perish together with Sabaf, but not only did the Supreme General take revenge, he also allowed me to live. My life is yours. Even if I become your slave for the rest of my life, I'm afraid I won't be able to repay you. Amon waved his hand. Don't say that. You didn't do anything wrong. You don't deserve such a tragedy. Since that's the case, I have something to ask you in private. The rest of you can leave now. John was still in a daze. Sayo grabbed his arm and pulled him out, winking and smiling. They waited outside, and after a while, Ms. Fai came out. Her eyes were red, and so was her face. She looked down at John and said, The Supreme General invites you in to speak in private. After a while, Hardadef came out. He lowered his head and peeked at Ms. Fai with a silly grin on his face. Sayo asked in bewilderment, General John, what are you smiling about? I've never seen you like this before. Is there something good? John continued to smile and did not answer. Amon walked out and said, Of course there's something good. After so many days of trouble, there's finally something good. Lord Sayo is also here. Let's have a feast tonight and have a drink. Tomorrow, we'll go to the blessing ceremony of Isis. The annual blessing ceremony of the goddess of Isis had finally arrived, and this year's ceremony was particularly lively. People from all the nearby cities came to attend, and just a few days before the ceremony, Supreme General Amon had caused a ruckus in Memphis, which became the talk of the town during their leisure time. There were hundreds of thousands of people gathered in the huge square, but under the command of the warriors, they were orderly and there was no pushing or shoving. When the ceremony began, no matter where they stood, the holy light that descended from the sky would fall on everyone. With a spear in hand and armor, Amon stood in the crowd at the edge of the square like an ordinary guard, in charge of maintaining order in this area. The surrounding people all looked at the high platform in front of the shrine in the distance, not knowing that the person standing next to them was the famous Amon. The warriors in bright armor formed a semicircle in front of the long steps of the shrine. In the middle of the formation was the high platform where the Holy Queen held the ceremony. Behind the high platform was a large magic formation formed by the priests. The noble lords were watching the ceremony from the long steps. Maria, wearing a golden crown and holding a staff, climbed the high platform. The bell in the shrine rang and everyone knelt down towards the high platform. Amon also knelt down and put his spear on the ground beside his hand. The Supreme General did not bow his head to kiss the ground, but looked up at the Holy Queen. Maria slowly raised her staff and glanced at the people in the square. She seemed to see everyone clearly, but one of them was fixed on a pair of eyes at the edge of the square in the distance. She showed a shallow smile, then slightly closed her eyes and began to sing. Aman did not know what Maria was singing. At this moment, the Holy Queen was in the center of a powerful magic formation. Aman's detection magic could not detect it, but he could feel it in his heart. The god's tear on the staff emitted a faint golden light. This golden light was getting stronger and stronger, but it was not dazzling. It spread to the surroundings and the sky. The magic formation began to operate. The golden light converged in the air and turned into a bright beam of light that shot towards the sky. The whole sky was golden. The light disappeared. The sky of Montefiore seemed to have been golden since ancient times. With the melodious sound of the bell, there was a white light like a veil, like a waterfall, like flying snow, like a drop of rain, like a fluttering feather, silently sprinkling down. This was the blessing of Isis. Hundreds of thousands of people in the square felt its magical comfort, including Aman. Everyone bowed their heads and prayed devoutly. Only Aman looked up at Maria. She stood in the middle of the crowd, exuding a holy light. Aman did not pray, nor did he think of anything. He just looked at her. The light sprinkled on his body, as if accompanied by a soft singing, just like Maria's answer to the question, "What is a blessing?" in the shrine. When the heart has the power to yearn for, the gods will not close their eyes to their people. They will bear witness to sin and kindness. They will let love and honesty meet, and justice and peace meet. The fertility of the earth will accompany the peace of the heart of the gods, washing away the unclean soul. It is a gift but also a test. This is the true blessing. If the so-called gods were really like what Maria said, then Aman would use the most devout oath to offer his body and mind. That was Maria's God, the God she believed in. Under the comfort of this light, amidst the crowd, Aman felt very weak, like a newborn baby who had nothing but a brand new life and future. This weakness was not weakness, but the germination of pure and exuberant vitality. Aman had forgotten whether he had lost his power or not. He didn't think about it at all. He just felt the call of this magic like a newborn. He was the only one in the square who did not pray, and he was the one who was the most focused on this ceremony. There was an assassin at the blessing ceremony the year before last, and there was a war with 2 kingdoms last year. Would there be an accident at this year's ceremony? Many people secretly raised their vigilance. Just as the ceremony reached its climax, the 9th-level Supreme Mage Wajhotep, who was in charge of monitoring the whole scene, suddenly frowned, because he heard the rumbling of thunder. Aman, who was in a state of ecstasy at the edge of the square, suddenly woke up. He also heard the thunder. The rolling thunder did not come from the sky, but from the depths of the earth in the east, accompanied by a slight tremor. The whole city was shaking, but the ordinary people were not yet aware of it. What was going on? Without time to think, Aman used his magic to cast spatial magic in an instant, trying to stabilize the ground under his feet as much as possible. His magic spread out, and then he felt the convergence of several other powerful magical forces. It was Vord and the other supreme mages who had taken the same measures. The strongest force that stabilized the ground was, of course, from the magic formation behind the high platform. The main function of this magic formation was to assist the Holy Maiden in completing the ceremony and ensure that it would not be disturbed by any accidents. The people in the square neither heard the muffled sound like rolling thunder under the ground, nor did they feel the slight tremor of the earth. They were still immersed in the light of the blessing of Isis. But Aman and the other supreme mages felt completely different. The magnitude of the tremor of the earth was slight, but the force was so huge that it was almost irresistible. So many people cast spatial magic at the same time, but they could only barely stabilize the central area of the city of Montefiore with the square as the center. They felt the impact of the magic power was so violent that although their bodies did not move, they felt like small boats being tossed around in a gale. The horror in their hearts could be imagined. The tremor of the earth did not last long, and it stopped before the end of the blessing ceremony. Aman finally breathed a sigh of relief. In the legends of the continent, the tremor of the earth was the wrath of the gods against the sins of the world. But when he felt the tremor of the earth during the blessing ceremony of Isis, he thought of such a legend and felt that it was absurd. Aman gently wiped the fine beads of sweat from his forehead, but his movements suddenly stopped. He realized one thing: his magic power had been restored. If not, how could he have cast spatial magic just now? It was restored without him realizing it at all. Amon did not even think about it when he cast the magic. Had he completely passed the test and achieved the 8th level of the power of two sides? Amon moved his body and suddenly realized something else. He had not fully recovered his strength. The magic power of the magic power had indeed been restored, and it was far stronger than before, but the power of the blood in his body was still the same as yesterday. It had not recovered or grown. His current situation was similar to that of an ordinary 8th level supreme mage. Amon closed his eyes and carefully felt his condition. Suddenly he smiled again. The power of the blood in his body could be said to have recovered, but it could also be said to have not recovered. It still needed a process of growth, like a baby slowly becoming strong. It was no longer clear whether it was the power of magic or the power of body arts. The power of two sides had finally merged into a true one, as if he had been reborn. Maria on the high platform, of course, also felt the tremor of the earth, but she continued to complete the ceremony without making a sound. Her calmness and composure were even better than when she was assassinated. After the blessing ceremony, the crowd sang poems in praise of the goddess Isis. Maria walked down the high platform and led the priests and officials into the shrine to offer sacrifices to the goddess. The ceremony was successfully completed. However, all the supreme mages present had an ominous premonition that something big must have happened in the distance. That night, Maria sent messengers to all the cities overnight to ask if there were any unusual changes. The next day, all the important officials in Montefiore were summoned to the shrine. Amon did not immediately return to his territory, but stayed in Montefiore to wait for news. Something big had really happened, something earth-shattering, and 3 of them happened at the same time. The tremor occurred in the Cape States, and the exact source was the Kenmit defense line where Amon had fought against the Uruk Legion. The entire lower Igut felt the tremor, but it did not cause too many casualties. According to the memory of a soldier on duty at the east gate of Kenmit, it was a sunny day, but the sky suddenly darkened. Looking up, there were no dark clouds, only a dark sky. It was not like at night where the stars and moon could be seen. All the residents of Kenmit came out of their houses, and the soldiers in the barracks also came out of their tents. The hearts of the people were shrouded by a huge unknown fear, and they gathered in the square in the center of the town to pray to the gods. Just as the people looked up at the dark sky, all kinds of lights appeared in the sky, like huge, colorful flames shining and circling, accompanied by the sound of impact, rumbling, and thunderous explosions. Then the earth began to tremble, and 3 of the 4 towers of Kenmit collapsed in the violent tremor, and more than half of the houses were destroyed. Fortunately, the people had gathered in the square because of the strange phenomenon in the sky. According to the memory of a boatman who was a few dozen miles north of Kenmit, he was repairing a damaged boat on the beach when he suddenly felt the sky darken. The blue sea churned even though there was no wind, reflecting the dark sky with a dark red color. There was a strong flash of light in the sky, and in the distant sky, balls of light exploded like fireworks. Then, the earth began to tremble violently, as if the rocks underground had turned into monsters, colliding and biting each other. The sea suddenly receded, revealing a large area of the seabed, leaving behind many stranded fish and prawns. The boatman ran towards the higher part of the shore, and along the way, he stumbled and tripped countless times. He felt the earth moving and looked back in horror. He was so frightened that his body went limp, and he sat on the hillside, unable to run anymore. The receding sea roared and formed a high wall, sweeping away the boats on the beach. Not far away, the shore was torn apart by an unimaginable force, and the sea flowed into the depths of the land through the crack. It was as if a giant blade had chopped down on the land, forcefully cleaving out a gap. The land moved horizontally along the Kenmit defensive line that Amon had laid out, and the sea flowed in from the north, forming a crevasse-like bay, shaped like a dagger cutting into the land. The sea swallowed up the battlefield where Amon and the Uruk Legion once fought, passing through the east of Kenmit and nearly 4/5 of the land, leaving only a narrow passage at the southernmost end. A new narrow inland sea was formed in the territory of the Sepet of Cape. When the sky cleared up again, the sea under the sunlight had a reddish hue, as if it was suffused with a faint bloody glow. Therefore, this narrow inland sea was later called the Scarlet Sea. The main city of the Cape States was 160 kilometers away from the source of the earthquake. It was the nearest large city, and the tremors were the most intense. Many deep cracks appeared on the sturdy city walls, and many houses in the city suffered varying degrees of damage. There were hundreds of casualties. However, the most serious accident occurred in the temple. The sturdy temple building was not damaged, but the statue of Horus that was enshrined in the center of the temple had its right wing broken. The huge stone statue fell from a high place and broke into many pieces. The priests panicked. If the tremors were too strong, the entire temple and the surrounding buildings would collapse, and the statue would inevitably be damaged. However, the temple and the surrounding buildings were all intact, and only the most important statue of Horus had one of its wings broken. This was a sign of disaster, and the consequences could be very serious. The statue in the main temple of the city was not an ordinary object. From the extraction of the stone, to the chiseling, transportation, and carving of the statue, the entire process was strictly supervised, and the names of all the participating craftsmen were recorded in a book. This huge statue had a history of 100 years, and it was majestic and sturdy without a single crack. How could it suddenly have one of its wings broken? According to the rules, the responsible craftsman would receive the most severe punishment, but the craftsman from 100 years ago could no longer be held accountable. City Lord Roddick organized people to investigate the disaster, and at the same time, he sent people to Montefiore and Aigut to send urgent reports while waiting anxiously. The news from all over the country quickly came back, and Roddick was both frightened and slightly relieved at the same time. The same thing happened to the temple of Horus in all the cities of Aigut. The body of the man, the head of the divine eagle, and the statue of Horus with its huge cloak-like wings were all destroyed, and the right wing was broken and smashed into the altar. This could only mean one thing: the destruction of the statue had nothing to do with the craftsman who built it, and it was not just the fault of the Cape States. But the same thing happened to the statues in the Temple of Horus in all the cities of the country. Only some small private temples had the statues of the king of the empires still intact. What did this mean? It made people not dare to think about it, and it made all the people of Aigut shudder. The earthquake formed a long and narrow inland sea in the territory of the Cape States. The goddess Murin once told Amon that this was the boundary of the realm of the Ennead of Aigut. The wings of the statues of Horus in the temples of the cities of the country were broken and damaged. Even the distant capital city of Thebes, which had no earthquake, was no exception. According to the legends since ancient times, this probably not only symbolized the anger of the gods, but also the fall or injury of the gods. Pharaoh, who claimed to be the incarnation of Horus on earth, should be the most frightened, but he had to stand up to appease the people in order to maintain his theocratic status. But Lazith too did not need to worry anymore. The third major event that happened at the same time was the sudden death of the pharaohs of Aigut. Chapter 166. 150. Moses, run. Lazith II's death happened in this context. Everyone kept the cause of his death a secret, and it even became a historical mystery. In later myths, legends, and discussions among the people, some said that Lazith too died of a palace murder, others said that the pharaoh died of the wrath of the gods, and most people said that he died with the destruction of the statue of Horus, because he claimed to be the incarnation of Horus on earth. These three major events happened on the same day. The entire empire of Aigut seemed to be shrouded in an invisible dark cloud. From the nobles to the commoners, everyone was in a state of anxiety. It was the same for the capital of Aigut, Montefiore. When Lady Saint Envie relayed the urgent reports from all over the temple to everyone, only heavy and nervous breathing could be heard. People were guessing various possibilities in their minds, but they didn't dare and couldn't speak their real thoughts. After a long while, the Supreme General Amon broke the silence and asked, "Did the messenger from the capital mention anything about the new pharaoh's succession?" The Holy Envie replied, His Majesty's son Ramses III succeeded the throne, and the new pharaoh renamed himself Merneptah. His Majesty of New Merneptah has decreed that the officials and servants of the various cities are to stay in their stations and are not allowed to go out without permission. They have to appease the people in the territory and wait for the latest decree and oracle. It was not surprising that the new pharaoh would ask the local officials to appease the people after he succeeded the throne. With such a major event happening, it was necessary to calm the panic of the people in the name of the oracle. It was a wise move for the new pharaoh to wait for the latest oracle everywhere. But the name Ramses III gave himself was meaningful. Merneptah meant the light of Ra, the guardian of Seth. The new pharaoh brought out Ra, the oldest of the Ennead, the father of the gods, and Seth, the legendary uncle of Horus. In the ancient myth of Igut, when Osiris established the empire of Igut, his brother Seth was the guardian of the royal power. It was understandable that the name pharaoh carried such a suffix, but the intention of not mentioning Horus in the name of Ra was intriguing. Amon stopped talking and thought of many things. Could it be that something had happened to the god Horus? He had read the ancient texts hidden in the temple of Isis, which were said to have not been read for 200 years. There were 2 poems in them about the story of Isis and Ra, and Horus and Seth. Legend had it that Isis had relied on wisdom and means to subdue the ancient father of the gods, Ra, and gained his power and status. In the other poem, the king of the gods became Osiris, the husband of Isis, and Osiris was also the first pharaoh who established the empire of Igut, but his brother Seth killed him and seized the throne. Later, Horus defeated Seth with the help of Isis and became the king of Igut. In other words, there had been conflicts between the Ennead of Igut. Some of the gods had retired, and the vast empire of Igut had become the domain of Horus. Montefiore, which had the largest population and the richest land in Igut, was the domain of the goddess Isis, and the underworld, the home of souls, was the domain of Osiris. The rest of the gods were subordinate or attached to them. If something happened to Horus, whether he fell or was injured, the other side of the Ennead who had been defeated was likely to make a comeback. Amon did not know much about the divine domain, but he could still piece together a lot of important information from the words of the goddess Murin. When Murin was disguised as a personal guard to rescue Amon on the battlefield, she once said, "Kenmet and the mountains on both sides are the border of the domain of the Ennead of Igut, and it's not easy for me to enter. I've been careful enough, I hope I didn't alarm them." Later, Horus appeared in the sky in the form of a huge cloud eagle, and Murin said angrily, "Because I appeared in the war." So Horus used this as an excuse to perform a miracle in an attempt to change the outcome of this war on earth with his divine power. "But I did it to protect you, and I did not invade the domain of the Ennead." What Horus did, although did not violate the agreement of the gods, was contemptible, and also exposed his weakness and fear. It seemed that there was some kind of agreement between the gods, and there was also some kind of agreement between different divine clans, and when this agreement was broken, it could lead to conflict. Although Enkidu was dead, he had killed the cloud eagle that appeared in the sky with an earth-shattering sword, and this battle was probably the fuse of a new conflict. Enkidu's sword was tantamount to a declaration that Horus was not as powerful as imagined, and his appearance on the battlefield had aroused the anger of the goddess Murin, which meant that the war was not only between mortals but also between the gods. Amon speculated that it was likely that the gods of the Anunnaki divine clan had attacked the Ennead, and the main god of the Ennead, Horus, had fallen or been seriously injured in this conflict. The appearance of the Red Sea and the broken wings of the statues of Horus in the shrines of the various cities may all have something to do with this. Then the defeated party in the Ennead divine clan was likely to regain the position of the main god, and the name of the new pharaoh implied this. Pharaoh's violent death was probably also related to this, and as for how Lazith II died, Amon had no way of knowing the inside story. Lazith II's death was so sudden that it was not a good thing for Amon either, and it meant that his recent efforts to wreak havoc in Montefiore were likely to be in vain. Everything that Amon had done was largely for Lazith II to see, and now that a new king had succeeded the throne, the situation was still unknown. If what Amon had guessed was true, and there had been a conflict and a change in status between the Ennead of Igut, it might not be beneficial to Amon himself. Don't forget the title that Lazith II had given him, the blessing of the great god Horus, the guardian of Igut, the guardian of the empire, the inheritor of the glory of Anare, and the supreme general whose name was praised by all the kingdoms. The first title of this title was the blessing of the great god Horus, and the soldiers and people believed that Horus had been inspired by Amon to appear, which was why Amon received such a noble title. There was another title after that, inheritor of the glory of Anare, just because Amon was the commander of the Anare Legion at the time, and the soldiers even referred to the Anare Legion as the Legion of Amon. Amon had sent Medanzo and Link back to his territory and instructed Moses to take the Supreme General's warrant to the plains of Duk, but something like this suddenly happened. If they had not set off earlier, they would not have been able to leave by now, and if they had set off, they would not have been able to pass through the checkpoints of the various cities and borders, unless they did not take the official roads. Since Amon had sent Medanzo and Link to follow them in secret, presumably these two disciples would be able to understand the changes in the situation in time and guide Moses and the others to take a detour. Amon did not send anyone to chase Moses and the others back. His thoughts were clear. Moses and the others should leave if they could. Medanzo and Link should have the ability to guide them around all obstacles. If they were stopped, they would be sent back to the territory. Since the Supreme General's warrant was issued before the death of Lazith II, it was not a mistake that no one was sent to retrieve it. But Amon himself had to return to his territory immediately according to the orders of the new pharaoh and wait for a new edict and a new oracle. As the Supreme General of the empire, at such a sensitive time, any unusual movements of his might cause suspicion from all sides. So he immediately set off with John and Mizphi, and before leaving he only had time to bid farewell to Maria in the shrine in front of everyone. Amon had a lot of worries in his heart, but he could not say them out loud. He also saw the worry in Maria's eyes. Maria was the guardian of the Ennead of Isis. If something really happened to the Ennead of Igut, the impact on the holy maiden of the temple of Isis would be unpredictable. Amon had too many secrets that he had buried deep in his heart, but at this moment he finally could not hold it in. Before he left, he sent John to find Gabriel and deliver a secret letter, and told Gabriel to personally deliver it to the holy maiden. In the letter, he mentioned his understanding of the divine realm and the relationship between the gods and some of his conjectures. He also reminded Maria to read an ancient book, which was the volume of poems written by the ancient bard that he had read. With Maria's intelligence, she should know what to do. As for what might happen and what preparations should be made, it was already beyond Amon's control. The death of Lazith II naturally required a state funeral, and the whole country mourned, and the ascension of the new pharaoh, according to the usual practice, was to be pardoned in the country and the whole country to celebrate. It was hard to tell whether this was a happy or sad event. On the first day Amon returned to his territory, the first thing he waited for was not an order from the new pharaoh, but a visit from the commander of Mount Horeb, Pa'era. Amon was very surprised and asked him, "Lord Pa'era, did you not receive the latest order from the capital? Why did you leave Mount Horeb at this time to come here?" Pa'era had a bitter face, and in a pleading tone, he said, "Supreme General, I came here because of the order from the pharaoh. I want to borrow people from the Supreme General." Amon frowned. "Did the pharaoh order you to borrow people?" "Borrow who?" Pa'era explained, "It was not the pharaoh who ordered me to borrow people, but I had to borrow people from the Supreme General because of the order from the pharaoh. On the first day after His Majesty Merneptah succeeded the throne, he sent someone to Mount Horeb to order that all the parangons produced should be sent to the capital according to the year of production, and that all the skilled craftsmen should be transferred to Hillmore, saying that he wanted to build a new capital around the shrine of Are. Since you took away the Duk miners, the production of parangons in Mount Horeb has dropped by nearly 40%, and there are a large number of mined or cores piled up there waiting to be extracted. But the mages can't complete these tasks at all, and now the pharaoh has transferred a large number of craftsmen away, urging them to send the parangons directly to the capital according to the original production. I really can't do anything, so I want to borrow your slaves to help." Amon shook his head gently and said, "They are my people, and it was not easy for me to take them away from Mount Horeb. How can I send them back? I know that your situation is really difficult, but I can't help you. Poera stepped forward and said, I don't want the Supreme General to send them back to Mount Horeb, I just want to ask the Supreme General for help. I can send someone to deliver the mind or cores, and then transport the extracted parangons back. They are your slaves and I can't ask you to help me for free. According to the old rules of Duk, for every 10 parangons mind, one of them will be paid to the Supreme General. This was a very attractive condition, but Amon's brows furrowed even more tightly. Didn't Pharaoh transfer a large number of craftsmen away? Even if my people can extract the parangons for you, you don't have enough people to mine the ore cores in the mines. Poera shook his head and said, the Pharaoh transferred away all the craftsmen who were mining the ores. Most of the craftsmen who were mining the ores are still in Mount Horeb. I will ask for help from the city and recruit a group of people urgently. The only problem is that the last step of extracting the parangons from the ores is the Supreme General. Amon smiled bitterly. Unfortunately, you are too late. His Majesty Pharaoh once gave me a territory in the plains of Duk, but I need to send my own people to occupy and reclaim it. I have already sent a group of slaves there, and I'm afraid they are already here. According to the latest order, they are to stay in the territory and not go out. Even if they can rush back, they will be too far away to put out a nearby fire. But since Lord Poera has asked me for help, I can't let you come here in vain. I will write a letter to the Temple of Isis to inform them of your difficulties and ask them to send a group of mages to support Mount Horeb. Poera left in disappointment. Whether Amon was telling the truth or not, he had no right to order the Supreme General to do anything. But at least the trip was not completely in vain. At least Amon promised to write a letter to the Temple of Isis for help. After seeing Poera off, Amon felt that things were not going well and fell into deep thought. There were two most important parangons in Igut. One was Hillmore in Upper Igut, and the other was Mount Horeb in Lower Igut. Hillmore was not as desolate as Mount Horeb. It was located about 600 miles north of Montefiore, at the confluence of the upper reaches of the Nile River with a tributary. Although the vicinity was mountainous, there was a large area of land that could be reclaimed in the valley, so Pharaoh Merneptah wanted to build the Temple of Ra and a new capital there. This move also meant that the old structure would be changed, and Ra was likely to replace Horus's position in the Empire of Igut. If Pharaoh then ordered the construction of the Temple of Ra in various cities, then Amon's guess would be confirmed. Who would become the king of the Ennead had nothing to do with Amon. He was only worried about two things. One was how Maria's identity would change subtly and what kind of changes she would encounter, and the other was the fate of the Dushians. According to the tradition of the Empire of Igut, every pharaoh had to build a mausoleum for himself from the moment he succeeded the throne. This was a huge project, and Merneptah had to build a new capital and a main shrine for Ra at the same time. This not only required a lot of wealth, but also required the assembly of craftsmen from all over the country. Where were the best craftsmen on the continent? It was the Duk clansmen. If Pharaoh Merneptah ordered them to be conscripted, even if they had already reached the plains of Duk, Amon would have to call them back, and it would not be as simple as dealing with Poera. Moses and the others were the slaves of Supreme General Amon, equivalent to his private property, and Pharaoh could not deprive them at will, but he could requisition them. With the identity of slaves, they were like goods that could be borrowed and returned. If these people were borrowed by the pharaoh to build a shrine or a capital, when would they be able to return? Especially for work like building a mausoleum, the most talented craftsmen were often the most difficult to return, and if they could not return, it would be reasonable and legal for Pharaoh to compensate Amon with a new batch of slaves. But what Amon wanted was not slaves. If that was the case, where would he find the people of Duk? Amon immediately called John over and gave him a lot of instructions. He also gave the last windriding shuttle and a spatial artifact to John, and ordered him to find Medanzo and Link immediately. He said apologetically, "My personal guard captain, I'm afraid you are the happiest person in Igut these few days. Although so many things have happened, it has nothing to do with you, just accompany Ms. Phi and be happy. I'm sorry to disturb your happiness, But the matter is very urgent, you must leave secretly and don't be discovered, go quickly and come back quickly. John hurriedly bowed and said, Ammonius, why do you speak to me like this? Your will is in order, I will say goodbye to Miss Phi and leave. The new Pharaoh Merneptah had specifically ordered that the officials of the territories were not allowed to go out without permission, so it was naturally inconvenient for John to leave the territory. Ammon gave him a wind-riding shuttle. As a supreme warrior, he could control a shuttle because he trained in the power of two sides. Ammon was very rich now, but precious artifacts were not so easy to obtain. Currently, he only had 3 spatial artifacts: the magical bone, the ventusum crafted by Crazy Ol, and a spatial bracelet crafted by Link using the ventusum. Link gave the bracelet to Ammon as a gift. He was especially good at crafting all kinds of artifacts, and Crazy Ol was once the best master craftsman on the continent. Ammon also passed on all the teachings he had received from Nietzsche to him. Now that something unexpected had happened, Ammon sent John to order Medanzo to give the ventusum to Moses and embed it in the iron staff to carry the necessary supplies. He also gave the spatial bracelet to Medanzo and Link. Ammon originally had a crystal shuttle and 2 wind-riding shuttles, but the crystal shuttle and the wind-riding shuttle had already been given to Medanzo. Now, the last wind-riding shuttle was given to John, who no longer had a flying artifact. But Ammon already had an 8th-level achievement and could fly instantaneously. The shadow-chasing lamp, the magic mirror of puppets, and the 2 sets of scorpion shell armor and snake scale armor that Link had repaired were all given to Medanzo. This showed how much importance Ammon placed on this matter. After John set off, Ammon also began to pack his things. Of course, he had to keep the large number of special parangons from Murin's treasure. The most precious artifacts in his hands included the god's tear, Gilgamesh's divine bow, Humbaba's 4 fangs and a snake's tendon, the whip that Enlil gave him when he was a shepherd, and so on. Chapter 167. After packing up, Ammon went to the temple of Batet in the manor. After tidying up, Ammon went to the shrine of Batet in the manor. So many things had happened, and he had guessed all kinds of possibilities in his mind. He wanted to find the cat that was once a god and ask it, hoping that Schrödinger could say something this time. Schrödinger's position in Ammon's territory was absolutely transcendent. Everyone knew that the Supreme General doted on it. Ammon had once put the king of Hittite aside and let the cat eat and drink first. Now, the cat could even jump on the altar and swagger around to enjoy the offerings. The people of Igut loved cats, and the Supreme General was even more of an Igut than the people of Igut. Ammon didn't know where Schrödinger went to play all day. If he wanted to find it, he could wait in the temple. No matter how long he waited, he would not be impatient. Some time ago, Ammon went to Montefiore to attend the ceremony. Schrödinger stayed comfortably in the territory and didn't go with him. He hadn't seen it for a few days and missed the cat. Ammon waited from noon until dusk. He didn't even eat dinner and told the servants not to disturb him. When the sky was completely dark, Schrödinger was seen strolling over the threshold of the temple. Ammon went up to him and smiled. "I've been waiting for you for a long time. Why are you only now back? Don't go out to play and delay your meal. The roasted fish is cold." Schrödinger squatted by the threshold and twisted his neck. The voice in Ammon's mind was a little unhappy. "Why is it roasted and not roasted fish?" Ammon apologized. "I was in a hurry and didn't have time to catch fish in the river. It's a little cold. I'll roast it again." Schrödinger asked, "You had time to wait for me all afternoon, but you didn't have time to catch a fish? You came back yesterday, but you didn't come to me until today." Was the cat acting coquettishly or angry? Ammon smiled apologetically and said, "Many things have happened recently. Yesterday I just came back from Mount Horeb and Poera came looking for me. Then I sent John to look for Medanzo and Link. There are still many things to deal with, and I just finished this morning. There's something I want to ask you, but I don't know when you'll be back, so I've been waiting here. If I find out next time, I'll go catch some fish first before looking for you." Schrödinger snorted. "Oh, so the Supreme General has something to do. Otherwise, why would he think of me, the cat?" Ammon still smiled and said, "Didn't I come to you when I was free?" Who was the one who built this temple? Now that the wings of the statues of Horus in the main shrines of the cities of Igut have been broken and damaged, of course I have to ask you for advice. Schrödinger suddenly sighed. I know all this. Aman, I want to ask you, is it worth it to pay so much just for a promise? If you continue like this, I don't know how much more you will have to pay. She was, of course, referring to the efforts that Aman had made in order to let his people return to their homeland. Aman was just the son of an old drunkard in Duk, and he was exiled to the mountains. Moses and the others did not owe him much. Up to this point, Aman had already done too much, and no one could say that he owed anything. Aman smiled and said, This is not only my promise to Goddess Murin, but also to Mayor Dusty in the underworld. If I can't even keep a promise, how can I achieve what I have today? I did pay a lot, but I also got everything I deserve. Schrödinger nodded silently and asked again, Some people in the world often do things because they have paid too much and can't give up. Aman, don't tell me you also have this idea of self-restraint? In the eyes of the gods, time is like the flowing Nile River. People live in the present, where everything they have paid has been paid. They only need to think about how much more they have to pay and what they can get. This is true wisdom. Aman shook his head and said, I am not a god, at least not now. I have never thought about what you said. I am just keeping my promise and I have my own gains. Schrödinger finally smiled. You are indeed my Aman. Only such a heart can help me unlock the seal. I don't know how long it will take you and how much effort you will put in. What do you want from me? Just say it. The cat stood up and walked to Aman's feet, rubbing against him intimately. Aman squatted down and sat on the ground. He stroked the cat's back and said, The first is good news. I have passed the test, regained my strength, and have achieved the 8th level. Schrödinger was surprised and happy. Really? Tell me about your situation. Aman told him how he felt. Schrödinger said, Congratulations, you have indeed passed the test, but there is still a process to achieve the 8th level. The path to the gods is different from other cultivation methods in the human world. The real difference begins now. You have gone through 2 tests at the same time. First, you have not lost yourself after losing your power. Second, you have been reborn and your understanding of power has changed. You can slowly experience the second test. When you really achieve the 8th level of the so-called power of 2 sides, you can try to help me unlock the seal. I am glad that the first thing you talk about is not the gods, but me. Aman then asked, The wings of the statues of Horus in the main shrines of the cities all over the country have been broken. What does this mean? Schrödinger's tone was indistinguishable from joy or sorrow. The wings of the divine eagle symbolize the protection of Igut. Someone has torn off its wings, which, of course, means that Horus has lost his position as the king of the gods in the Ennead. I don't know what happened to him, but in short, he has become a loser. Aman asked again, Igut has changed the name of the new pharaoh to Merneptah and is going to build a shrine and a new capital for Anare. What does this mean? Schrödinger thought for a moment before replying. On the surface, Anare has become the king of gods again, but I think Seth should be the real winner. In the name of Anare, he has retaken the divine realm. As for what exactly is going on, I don't know. Aman, even you don't know? Schrödinger smiled bitterly. I have been imprisoned for 100 years, and I don't know much about recent events between the gods. Aman, then you should know what happened back then. Igut is the most powerful empire on the continent, and Horus, who owns this divine realm, should also be the most powerful god. Who could defeat him? Schrödinger snorted coldly. Horus is not the most powerful god in Igut. There is no place for him among the Ennead. If he had not become the king of the gods and enjoyed such a vast divine realm, Horus would probably not be a match for any of the Ennead. Aman frowned. Then how could he have become the king of gods? Schrödinger sighed. It's because of Isis. She and Anare are the 2 most powerful gods among the Ennead, and it is said that Isis defeated Anare. Aman, then why didn't Isis become the king of gods? Schrödinger narrowed his eyes, as if caught up in his memories. That was a long time ago, thousands of years before I entered the Ennead. I can't know the specific situation, I've never even met an RA, and only vaguely heard the gods mention that an RA may not have really lost to Isis. He just gave up. Amon's eyes also narrowed. Gave up? Schrödinger nodded. Yes, he gave up the divine realm that absorbs divine power and gave up his position as the king of gods. The gods do not do inexplicable things. It is said that this giving up is also a kind of detachment, the pursuit of another realm, and being defeated by Isis is also an opportunity for enlightenment. These are just rumors among the gods, I don't know if they are true or false, and they are beyond my understanding. Amon smiled bitterly. If even you can't understand, then I'm afraid it doesn't make much sense for me to ask these questions now. Schrödinger, yes, it doesn't make sense for you to talk about these things when you're not in that position. I don't know how Isis defeated an RA, but one thing is clear to all the gods. There was an agreement between an RA and Isis that Isis herself could not become the god of the gods. But Isis was very clever, and she made her husband, Osiris, the king of the Ennead. Apart from Isis and an RA, the god who contributed the most to the development of the divine realm was Seth. Seth, of course, refused to accept it, so he defeated Osiris and seized the throne, and Isis helped Horus defeat Seth, and that was the so-called king of Igut in later generations. Amon blinked and said, "Oh, so that's what happened." It seems that Isis is very trustworthy, helping her husband and son become the king of the divine realm, and she herself has always kept the agreement with an RA. Schrödinger, there are no gods in this world who do not keep their promises, otherwise they would not have become gods. Amon frowned. But this still doesn't explain my doubts. Since Isis is so powerful, and Horus has been the king of the Ennead for thousands of years, how could such a change happen today? Schrödinger, Horus has the status of the king of gods, of course he is more powerful, and with the support of Isis, other gods cannot shake him. My guess is the same as yours. Enkidu's sword on the battlefield let people see that Horus is not as powerful as they thought. Maybe because he took the initiative to appear on the battlefield and violated the agreement between the divine clans, he was attacked by the Anunnaki divine clan, and was either injured or killed, and Seth took the opportunity to defeat him. Amon shook his head and said, "But I still don't understand, since Horus could not have achieved the position of the king of gods with his own strength, and all this was because of the help of Isis, then didn't Isis help him again?" Schrödinger was silent and lowered his head for a long time. Amon waited for a long time before asking, "What's wrong with you? What are you thinking about?" The cat sighed. "I have been imprisoned for too long and missed too many things. I'm afraid that Isis is no longer here. I should have thought of this long ago. Otherwise, how could Bear steal the rib of Osiris from the shrine, and how could he leave Montefiore with the guardian goddess? If Isis was still here, these things would not have happened." Amon was shocked. "What? Isis is no longer here? What does this mean? Has she fallen?" Schrödinger was silent again, as if lost in deep thought. The cat frowned and replied after a while, "It may be that she has fallen, or it may be something else. The magic of Isis is beyond my understanding. Now that I think about it, when Bear entered the shrine, Isis should have been gone. As for where she went, I can't answer." Amon's tone was a little incredulous. "It has been 36 years since Bear stole the rib and took away the guardian goddess. According to your guess, Isis was already gone at that time. Why did this happen only today?" Schrödinger sighed again and again. 36 years may be a long time for mortals, but it is very short for the gods. Although Isis is no longer here, Horus has the status of the king of gods and a vast divine realm, which adds to his power, and the gods do not know how powerful he is. He may have been injured in the battle with the Anunnaki, giving Seth the opportunity to challenge him. Without the protection of Isis, Horus, who has lost his position as king of gods, would never have had a chance to take it back. Amon asked another question that was very interesting. "I know that the relationship between the gods is not the kinship that people understand. So is Horus really the son of Isis? The ancient book you showed me described a very bizarre story. Is it true that Isis became pregnant next to the body of Osiris and gave birth to Horus?" Schrödinger smiled. You have to join a certain divine clan to fully understand the relationship between the gods. But Horus should be the son of Isis. When he first appeared, the gods once suspected that Horus was the reincarnation of Osiris, but later it became clear that he was not. Osiris did not leave, and he is still the god of the underworld of the Ennead. It is said that Horus was the son of Isis before she became a god. He had been hiding on earth, and it was Isis who guided him to become a real god. It was only after Seth defeated Osiris that Horus officially appeared. It was rare that Schrödinger was willing to speak so much today, as if he wanted to pour out all the past. Amon took the opportunity to ask, "I have never understood a few questions. What is a divine realm, and what is a divine clan?" Schrödinger turned his head to look at him and said, "According to your so-called power of two sides, you can only fully understand this after achieving the 9th level. But before that, you have to help me unlock the seal, so I will try to explain it clearly." The so-called divine clan was an ancient system of relationships. The earliest gods mastered the secret of becoming a god, which was the language mentioned in the ancient poems. They would guide some people on this path, and these people may be liked by the gods, or may be chosen by the gods, including the relatives and friends of the gods, and also those who were strong in the mortal world. This was similar to a teacher-student relationship, but not entirely so. The gods of the previous generation were the guides, and only those who received guidance were eligible to join a certain divine clan and abide by the rules of this divine clan, thus becoming a group of gods. The Ennead and the Anunnaki divine clans were formed in this way. Knowing how to become a god did not mean that one could become a god. For example, the power of two sides that Amon practiced was not something that everyone could master, and even if they did, it was difficult to pass various tests, and most people could not reach the end. The gods would not guide and teach for no reason. Instead, they would only choose those who were most likely to succeed. As for the divine realm, there were two meanings. One was a kingdom where people who believed in a certain divine clan lived, and such a kingdom was often created by the gods. For example, Osiris and Seth created the empire of Igut. The other meaning was difficult for mortals to understand, and it was also known as the realm of the source of divine power. It was difficult to clearly describe this concept in words, and usually it was where the shrine of a certain god was located, where the god received the offerings and prayers of his people. There might be many gods worshipped in a temple, but the gods had to attach their consciousness and thoughts to the statues. Only then would the statues symbolize the true gods. When each statue was completed, the priests needed to hold a ceremony to pray and offer sacrifices, asking for the gods' blessing. Amon had experienced this firsthand in many shrines, and the gazes of the gods were invisible, as if they could hear the hearts of people praying. Because of this, Amon forbade his disciples from praying to other gods. On the other hand, it was only through such a ceremony that the gods could turn the statue into an attached embodiment of their consciousness and mind, and the cold stone statue also seemed to have a strange life. The divine realm had an exclusive quality, and if a god also wanted to attach his consciousness and mind to his own statue, he must obtain the consent of the main god of the divine clan, which was also one of the agreements between the gods. This was divided into two situations. One was to enjoy the sacrifices of people in the same shrine and become a subgod beside the main god. The other was to open up a separate small divine realm in the vast divine realm. This second situation was equivalent to the shrine of Murin in Duk or the temple of Isis in Montefiore. The main god of the Ennead was Horus, and because of the special status of the goddess Isis, the city of Montefiore, which had the largest population and the most abundant resources in the lower Igut, had always been the realm of Isis. The situation of Murin was completely different from that of Isis. Duk was the battlefield of the ancient gods, a land abandoned and cursed by the gods. When the Anunnaki divine clan split, according to the agreement, it was included in the scope of Enlil's divine realm, but in fact, it did not become a real divine realm. Without people who believed in and sacrificed to the gods, there was no divine realm to speak of. The vicinity of Duk was barren and not suitable for people to live and reproduce at all. Later, the goddess Murin asked Enlil to establish her own divine realm in the land of Marduk, and Enlil agreed and made a certain agreement with the goddess Murin. The agreement between the gods was confidential, and only they knew about it, and Schrödinger could not know the specific content. Chapter 168. 152. The realm of the source of divine power. To make the land of Marduk a true realm of the source of divine power, Murin had to complete everything herself. This was very much like how Pharaoh gave Amun a piece of land in the plains of Duk, but it was only a piece of paper, and Amun still had to occupy and reclaim it himself. Murin requested that the sinners of the Battle of the Gods be moved to the land of Marduk. These people originally believed in the gods of the defeated side and were the ancestors of the Duk miners. They were punished to mine parangons in an extremely desolate and difficult environment, and their survival and reproduction faced great challenges. Only those with the strongest blood could survive, but they were still in danger of extinction. At this time, Murin performed a miracle, taught them the skills of Duk mining, and gave them the oracle of the patron god, so that they could survive in this dangerous land of Marduk for generations. Because these people were the descendants of the sinners, according to the oldest oracle of Anunnaki, they were not allowed to leave the land of Marduk. This ancient oracle was passed down from generation to generation, and later became the law of the Hittite kingdom, but few people knew its origin. This law had been enforced by the dynasties for hundreds of years, and there was a very practical reason. The people of Duk were the best craftsmen on the continent, and Duk was such an important producer of parangons, and later became a producer of iron ore. If these miners left Duk, it would be a loss for any kingdom, unless Duk no longer existed. If there were no laws and regulations, who would want to live in such a difficult environment for generations? As for what happened later, there was no need for Schrödinger to describe it. Amun himself knew it very well. The people of Duk betrayed the oracle and lost the protection of Murin, and Enrol launched a flood to destroy the place, turning the plains of Duk into 1,000 miles of fertile land. In the ancient prophecy, the true god of the gods would be born here, and perhaps Enrol thought that the time had come. As for the realm of the source of divine power, what did it mean? The believers claimed to be the servants of the gods. Their beliefs, sacrifices, and prayers were the source of the gods' power. This power was different from ordinary magic and body arts. It was a kind of divine power that the gods possessed. Schrödinger had never possessed an independent divine realm of her own, so her understanding of divine power was not comprehensive. There were two main aspects to it. First, it could gather power to strengthen one's soul. It was like having many selves. When these countless selves were gathered together, one could understand the ultimate meaning of life in the world. Secondly, it could help the gods face the judgment of fate and judgment of the end of days. At this point, Amun couldn't help but ask, do the gods also have to face the judgment of fate and judgment of the end of days? Schrödinger's body trembled slightly. Whether it is body arts or magic, if one practices to the peak of the 9th level, they will have the power to fight against the gods in the mortal world. They are often called demigods, such as Gilgamesh and Enkidu. But the true demigods did not have this meaning in the beginning. They were people who were guided by the gods and had the potential to become gods. But in the eyes of the world, they were often gods, such as me in the past. If you achieve the 9th level of the power of two sides, you will be a true demigod in the ancient legends. You will be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the gods in many myths and even have a divine realm. But to truly achieve that realm of eternal life, the judgment of fate and judgment of the end of days are a test that must be passed. Do you know why the Ennead got its name? Amun blinked and said, "Isn't it because of the Ennead?" Schrödinger, it is indeed because of the Ennead, but you don't know the real reason. Before Horus, only these 9 people became the true gods of eternal life, and Horus was the 10th and the last. The other gods, including me in the past, were only demigods. I was once only one step away, but in the end, I did not succeed. Amun went to participate in the blessing ceremony of Isis and stayed in Montefiore for a total of 7 or 8 days. He sent Madanzo back the day after arriving in Montefiore to let Moses and the others leave. It was a long journey, and although they had been prepared, it took time to pack everything up and leave. So when Amun returned to the territory, Moses and the others had only left a few days ago. More than 60 clansmen, more than 20 carriages, loaded with various supplies, including farming tools, clothing, food, seeds, tents, living utensils, and so on. They were going to reclaim the wilderness and rebuild their hometown, and it was the most important migration after ending their bitter fate. Naturally, they had to bring as much as possible of what they needed. Especially after leaving the territory of Igut, they had to cross thousands of miles of desert and hundreds of miles of swamps and jungles. Food, water, and self-defense weapons were indispensable, and more than 20 carriages were fully loaded. Such a team could not move very fast, and when the new pharaoh's orders spread to all parts of the country, they had just arrived at the city of Heliopolis, which was also the city closest to Montefiore on the east bank of the Nile River, and still far from the border of Igut. Moses was stopped at the city's checkpoint, and the officer guarding the checkpoint looked at the general's order and then told them, "Now that the new pharaoh has ascended the throne, according to the latest decree, you can no longer go." Fortunately, this place is not far from the city of Harak. Please return to the territory immediately. If you continue to go forward in violation of the order, you will be arrested and forcibly repatriated. Moses had no choice but to order the caravan to turn around and head south. The clansmen's disappointment was indescribable. They had waited for 6 years, and who knew how much suffering they had gone through. Just as they saw a glimmer of hope, it was suddenly extinguished by a sudden change. That damned Pharaoh Lazith too, why did he have to die at this time? And now such a change had happened in the empire of Igut. Once the people who relied on faith fell into despair, the pain and hesitation were indescribable, and they did not even have the strength to walk. Moses comforted the clansmen, "We have already endured and waited for so long, why not continue to persevere? As long as God has not given up on us, there is no need to be disappointed." The clansmen asked Moses, "But where is God?" The 12 miners that Moses taught all said, "God is watching us. As long as we do not lose faith in our hearts, we can find our home." That night, they did not pass through any towns. They stopped at a place on the bank of the Nile River, sheltered from the wind, and spent the night in a tent. In the distance was the rushing water, and close by was the high mountains and dense forests. Moses ordered the 12 clansmen who had practiced the power of 2 sides to take turns to keep watch, while he sat in the carriage and meditated, calling Allah in his heart. "My God, the Savior of hope. I call to you, I beg you to hear my voice. Do not let the flame of hope be extinguished again. Guide my people back to their home, even if it means sacrificing my body, mind, and life as long as they return to the land of Duk. God, I am your servant, please help me." At this moment, Moses heard a voice in his mind, "God is watching you and your people. Please come to the forest and accept the guidance of the flame of hope." Moses hurriedly opened his eyes and got out of the carriage. Without being discovered by the clansmen, he quietly sneaked into the forest by the roadside with his iron stick in hand. Sure enough, there was a faint flame in the distance. He passed through the trees and came to a valley. He saw a bush burning in the fire. When he got closer, he saw that the tree was intact. There were 2 people standing on the open ground. He hurriedly knelt down and saluted, "Messenger of God, Moses is summoned." One of the messengers said, "Moses, there is a new situation now. The pharaohs of Igut will not allow you to leave. If you stay, you may never have the chance to return to your home. Do you choose to go back or to move forward?" Moses replied, "If God can guide the way, of course I choose to move forward and return to my home." The other messenger asked again, "This road is very difficult, and it will be even more difficult to lead so many people. You have a chance to go by yourself. God allows you to choose." Moses pursed his lips and said, "No, if I wanted to leave alone, I could have done so long ago. God told me to guide my people back to their home. Even if I can't set foot on the land of Duk with all my efforts, I have to help my people fulfill their wishes." The messenger nodded. "Very good, you really did not let God down. Give me your stick, let me teach you how to do it." Moses passed the iron staff to the oracle. Link turned around and took out the ventusselve of the wind that was embedded inside and replaced it with the one that was used to forge a spatial magic tool. Then he turned back and handed the stick to Moses. "I will teach you how to use it. You can only move forward by relying on this stick. The messenger of God will guide the way ahead and erase your traces behind." Moses stayed in the forest for most of the night, and only quietly returned when it was almost dawn. At dawn, he gathered everyone and said, "Last night, God summoned me. He told us that we cannot return to Ammon's territory, or we will never have the chance to return home. From today onwards, we will walk in the deep mountains and wilderness, avoiding all the checkpoints and tracking, and walk back to our home on foot. God is watching us, and he will also guide the way." The worried clansmen were pleasantly surprised when they heard this, and there was a lot of discussion. To walk thousands of miles in the wilderness, they had to avoid the official roads. If they lost their caravans and supplies, how could they cross thousands of miles of deserts and swamps? This was tantamount to becoming a fugitive slave. They would be hunted in Egypt, and no one knew how many dangers they would face. It was almost an impossible task. Moses waited until everyone was almost done talking, then asked, "God is testing our faith. Whoever is willing to be an eternal slave of Pharaoh, to build the shrine and the mausoleum, can go back now. Clansmen, who among you is willing to embark on the road home and follow me into the mountains?" The 12 strength clansmen stood up and said, "We are willing to embark on this road. God has given us power and light to guide us." Moses nodded with relief and said, "God has given you a title called judges. From today onwards, you are the 12 judges of the Dushians. You will lead your clansmen to sacrifice to God and strengthen the power in your hearts." Another person stood up and asked, "But God did not give us power, Moses. Can you guarantee that God will always protect us on our way home?" Moses leaned on his cane and said, "No one can guarantee in the name of God. This is just the promise of God to our people, to provide selfless guidance and help. Power belongs to you. Faith makes you stronger, hope is in your heart, and the road is under your feet." In the end, all the clansmen followed Moses, abandoned the carriage and entered the dense forest in the mountains. Although some of them were hesitant in their hearts, they did not dare to go back alone since so many of their clansmen had made the same choice. Moses walked through the valley where he met the oracle yesterday, through the bushes that had been burning with fire, and entered a narrow path in the mountains on the east bank of the Nile River. He did not know that the valley was the place where Ammon had been hunted, and the path that the oracle had guided them to take was the road that Ammon had used to escape from the hunters to Montefiore in the wilderness. Now Ammon let his clansmen leave along this road, except for a few places where they had to bypass cities and towns. Most of the rest of the road was traveled by Ammon himself, so they could avoid human habitation and the patrols of the city guards. The carriages were abandoned on the side of the road, but the clansmen still led the oxen, horses, and donkeys. These animals had grass to eat on the road, and if necessary, they could be slaughtered for food, because they had almost no chance to go to the cities to buy supplies. More than 60 clansmen, most of whom were strong young miners, unloaded as much as they could from the carriages, and let the animals carry them or carry them on their backs, making their way through the wilderness with difficulty. Walking like this would affect their speed, but Moses did not stop his clansmen from carrying the animals and supplies. After all, no one could walk such a long distance empty-handed. Although God had given him a magical cane, he had instructed him in advance that it was best not to use it. The 12 judges were the strongest supporters of returning home. Their names were Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar, Deborah, Gideon, Tola, Jair, Jephthah, Ibzan, Elon, Abdon, and Samson. Moses' servant, Joshua, asked along the way, "Once we leave, we'll become fugitive slaves. We can't buy things in the cities, so we can only rely on the supplies we brought with us. Not to mention we have to cross the desert. Do we need a unified plan?" Moses nodded and said, "Then you'll be responsible for the registration, unified management, and distribution of supplies. If we use our food sparingly and don't delay our journey, it should be just enough. We just need to bring enough water before we enter the desert." Joshua accepted the order and made a count of the livestock and food the clansmen brought with them. He also calculated the amount of food they had to consume each day and distributed them at a fixed time. There were not many mountains around the city of Heliopolis, but there were undulating wilderness and dense forests far away from the Nile Valley. As long as they avoided the inhabited villages and cities, almost no one would notice them. Medanzo drove the crystal shuttle in front of them as a lookout, while Link held the Sphinx and the shadow-chasing lamp and quietly followed behind the group, erasing the traces of the large group. Link was the tribe leader of the savages, so he was good at traversing the wilderness and tracking prey since he was young. Naturally, he was the best at this. John returned to the territory and reported to Amon that Moses and the other clansmen had abandoned the carriages and left through the small paths. Amon nodded and thanked them for their hard work, then instructed John to continue patrolling the territory every day as usual. Technically, there was no longer any need for Amon to stay in Egypt, and he could leave at any time. However, he had been staying in his territory, behaving like a law-abiding and honest supreme general of the empire. Instead, Schrödinger was the first to lose his cool and took the initiative to ask Amon, "Why aren't you leaving yet? Whether it's returning to the plains of Duk or escorting Moses in secret, it's better than staying here. Do you still want to stay in the empire of Igut and get promoted and make a fortune?" Amon smiled bitterly. "You know why I'm not leaving, so why deliberately tease me?" Kitten puffed up her cheeks. "Is it because of her? You're worried about her, but you don't think about the fact that you might not be able to protect yourself." The her she mentioned was obviously referring to the guardian holy maiden of the temple of Isis, Maria. Amon nodded and said, "Yes, of course it's because of her. According to you, the goddess Isis is long gone, and now that today's change has happened, Horus has lost his position as the king of the Ennead. I'm afraid the status of the temple of Isis will also be shaken." Kitten smiled. "You're already the supreme general of the empire, you don't see the problem so simply, do you? The guardian holy maiden of Isis is just a symbol, and even if the pharaoh wants to worship the new king, he has to take into account the beliefs and habits of the people. Although the status of the temple of Isis has declined, why do you have to worry about Maria? Do you think that Maria has nothing but the identity of the guardian holy maiden of Isis?" Schrödinger's words were very reasonable. The guardian holy maiden of the temple of Isis was a symbol of the theocracy of the empire. The main temple of the cities of Igut was the temple of Horus, but the main temple of Montefiore was the temple of Isis, and it had become the center of the theocracy of the whole Lower Igut. The reasons were complicated. On the one hand, of course, it was because of the unique status of the goddess Isis, which was related to the realm of the gods. On the other hand, it was because the main territory of the Igut was divided into two prosperous areas, the Upper and Lower Igut. In the Lower Igut, there must be a center that symbolized the theocracy and the royal rule. The existence of the guardian holy maiden of Isis had a dual background of history and reality. Even if the new pharaoh wanted to worship the new king, he still needed to consolidate the rule of the Lower Igut. The status of the guardian holy maiden of Isis might be weakened, but the prestige of Maria herself in the Lower Igut was already very stable. If she could adapt to the situation and knew how to cooperate, it would not be difficult for her to cope with the new changes. Amon even thought that Maria had the talent to be the prime minister of the empire. Even if she was not the guardian holy maiden of Isis, she was fully qualified and capable of becoming the new high priest of the empire. But Amon was still worried. What was he worried about? Thinking of this, he said to Schrödinger, "It is because of her, but not entirely because of her. I want to stay here and see what happens. It will be good for Moses and the others. At least I can get the latest decree in time and use my identity to provide protection. Another reason, of course, is because of you." Chapter 169. 153 The birth of a monotheistic religion. Amon replied, "I have experienced a brand new power, which is completely different from pure body arts and magic arts. It is like a newborn baby growing up, and the power is inseparable in the process of growth. This requires a stable environment to experience and nurture, and I'd better stay in the territory to train so that I can unlock the seal for you as soon as possible." Schrödinger: "In that case, I'm too embarrassed to urge you to do anything. The nurturing of power cannot be rushed. I'll stay here with you." If other factors were not taken into account, The best time for Aman to leave the empire of Iga was after Moses reached the plains of Duk. Based on the speed at which the clansmen walked through the wilderness, it would take at least half a year. Aman did his best to arrange everything, but he was not fearlessly anxious. Except for being a little worried about Maria's situation, the Supreme General was calm. According to Schrödinger, Aman's breakthrough to the 8th level of the power of two sides would be completely different from other training methods in the world, like a brand new beginning. Aman did not quite understand at first, but when he recovered the power of the bloodline in his body little by little, he realized what was going on. In the silence of the night, Aman closed his eyes and meditated as usual, but what he recovered was the power of the bloodline in his body, merging it with his magic power to grow together. A bow floated quietly in front of him. It was the divine bow that had once shocked the world. The bowstring was pulled silently, and an invisible arrow of energy condensed. But Aman did not shoot the arrow, otherwise the house would collapse. He was just demonstrating. Then the bowstring was put back, and the invisible arrow disappeared. The divine bow spun, as if caught by an invisible hand, and gently floated back to Aman's leg. Aman opened his eyes in the darkness and sighed. So that's how it is. I should have known. He took out a dagger from thin air. It was one of the most common weapons in Aman's collection. It was the one Mayor Dusty gave him when he left Duk. The saber flew through the air like a fish, emitting a dazzling light. It slashed out a cross-shaped arc of light in the air, which then spun rapidly to form a circular shield. Next, the saber slashed out and quickly retracted, flying back into Aman's hand. He muttered to himself in the darkness, "This is the last sword attack that Enkidu used against me." However, that sword attack was much stronger. Before it could reach me, he had already died. Aman used to practice the power of two sides, but in truth, he was still just a warrior and a sorcerer at the same time. He could only use magic in combat or pick up a weapon at the same time while casting magic. But at this moment, the situation had changed. He was clearly using a weapon to cast magic, and at the same time, he was also using magic to control the weapon. The two powers were no longer distinguishable. Gilgamesh's bow could not be drawn at all unless one was born with divine strength or had the power of a supreme warrior. But Aman did not hold it in his hand. He simply used spatial magic and energy magic to draw the bow. At the same time, if one was not a supreme mage, one would not be able to condense the arrow. Aman did not combine these two powers together, but used one power naturally. This was different from pure magic and body arts. It was not simply a combination of both. This made Aman's methods much more refined than before. In the future, there would no longer be a distinction between body arts and magic arts. Instead, there would only be emphasis on what he was good at. Aman recalled Enkidu's last battle against the black vortex and lightning in the sky. The broken broadsword in his hand turned into a misty golden light, not because it was too fast and dazzling. Enkidu was a pure warrior. He only practiced body arts. When he reached the peak of the 9th level and was about to break through, he experienced the fusion of power. It was difficult to say whether it was body arts or magic. This kind of power existed from the very beginning. Body arts and magic were just two sides of the same body. To be more precise, it should be called two sides as one. One was its core. All kinds of magic and body arts in the world were just 1,000 sides of this one body. Aman thought that his practice of the power of two sides was the right path. Now he finally understood why Schrödinger kept saying that it was the so-called power of two sides. In fact, Aman had taken a long detour. Even Bear, who had guided him, had only explored the middle of the path. This detour was not in terms of cultivation. His efforts were not in vain. Instead, it was in terms of understanding. He had finally reached the end of the path. If Aman had not practiced the so-called power of two sides, he might have had to wait until the last moment of Enkidu's life to suddenly understand it. He closed his eyes again and fell into a deep meditation, completely forgetting everything outside his body and immersing himself in the world of his mind. If he had understood it from the beginning, he would have had more means. But Aman's knowledge and experience could not have come out of thin air. What he learned was the body arts and magic of this world. Of course, he was influenced by everyone's established ideas. It was only today that he fully understood it. Aman recalled the skills of the miners in Duk. In fact, it was the power taught by the gods, and there was no distinction between the so-called body arts and magic. He carefully reflected on the path he had walked step by step. Starting from the simplest first achievement, how to directly practice the power of one side, without the concept of magic or body arts, but only according to the individual's talent. His path of practice was finally clear. The understanding was subversive, and even overturned all previous conclusions. It was a kind of negation. He also found one thing. To awaken this power was much more difficult than to awaken the power of magic and body arts, and even more difficult than to awaken the power of two sides of one body. Who could awaken this power? There was one situation that did not need to be judged, and that was those who had already achieved high achievements. Whether it was a supreme mage or a supreme warrior, they had this aptitude to achieve what they had already achieved. It was nothing more than the difference in the path they had taken. To re-embark on this path, one only needed to understand and confirm and complete the missing practice. Crazy, Ol could also embark on this path. Although he still had to pass all kinds of tests and there was almost no hope of success, at least he could understand the goal he had been pursuing all his life. Aman thought of Goliath again. Goliath once said that he and Enkidu were separately trying two other paths, and Aman was confirming the power of two sides of one body. Perhaps they could both solve the secret of becoming gods. This was not entirely unreasonable. The path explored by Crazy, Ol, Bear and Aman could be said to be unique. They were constantly approaching the secret of becoming gods, and today they finally understood the origin. In the darkness, Aman forgot the outside world, even his own existence. But tears silently welled up in his eyes. He silently prayed to Nietzsche and Bear, with gratitude and blessings. The hard work of 3 generations of geniuses and the summary of research on the basis of the experience of countless geniuses had finally solved the mystery, and the answer had always existed in the world. In the following days, Supreme General Aman closed himself off from visitors. Even the servants around him could not see him. Only John knew where he was. He lived in the village built by Moses and the others. He began to train his power again from the lowest level. It was not so much training, but rather experience and mastery, because he had already broken through to the next level. He only had one disciple, John, by his side, so he called John over and said, "I once taught you the mining skills of Duk and the most basic magic meditation. Because of this, you integrated the restless power and became a supreme warrior. Later, I taught you the power of two sides and let you practice magic and body arts separately. But today, I want to show you the real path. Abandon all prejudices and follow my instructions. Practice all the powers you have learned in this way." John was surprised and said, "Ammonius, are you going to awaken another power for me?" Aman shook his head and said, "This is not another power, it is what you have been training in the past, but it points to the true origin. It is very difficult to awaken this power, but for those who have already become supreme mages or supreme warriors, they only need to comprehend and experience it again." Aman passed on his latest understanding to John, and John asked another thing. "Ammonius, Ms. Phi is an advanced warrior, can she also practice this power?" Aman smiled and replied, "Not everyone can succeed. She has 2 choices. One is to continue practicing body arts, and after she becomes a supreme warrior, I will guide her to practice this power. The other is to hold the awakening ceremony for her now, and if she succeeds, she will start training from the beginning." John was surprised and overjoyed. "Ammonius, you agree?" Aman nodded. "Yes, but I will not teach her directly. You will teach her what you have verified. I need someone to help me conduct the power awakening ritual, and this person must be able to verify this body's power to the 7th level before I can do it. Go and practice by yourself first, you will personally awaken Ms. Phi's power." The latest decree of the empire's Pharaoh Merneptah was quickly passed down to the various cities according to an oracle. After all, there were only a few people like Aman who knew what was going on, and the oracle announced by His Majesty Pharaoh shocked the whole country. The great king of Igut, Horus, was injured in the battle against the evil foreign gods in order to protect the empire and has returned to heaven to recuperate. Ra, the father of the gods who was born in the lotus of the beginning and lives above the source of the Nile River, has blessed Igut with glory, and Seth has become the new guardian of the king. It was not easy to change the beliefs of people for thousands of years, but Pharaoh ordered that Ra be promoted to the chief god of the various shrines, and Ra was the father of the gods in the myth of Igut. If Pharaoh wanted to change the beliefs of the shrines, and it was logical to do so, there was no other choice. In the myth of Igut, when the empire was founded, Seth was also the guardian of the king. This did not immediately change people's habits, but it clearly defined the change of the main god through the laws of the world. Another decree issued by Pharaoh Merneptah according to the oracle surprised Amun. The decree clearly declared that Ra was the one and only god in the world, while the original gods were uniformly referred to as angels. Seth's identity was the head of the angels, the guardian of Egypt for the gods. The ordinary people could not react for a while, but they could not understand what this meant. Pharaoh not only gave Ra the status of the supreme god, but also became the only god by law, and changed the names of the other gods to angels. Among them, Seth became the most important angel, and actually had the status of the original Horus. Schrödinger was also one of the gods, belonging to the Ennead, and she had never even seen Ra. The ancient father of the gods had long since retired. The status of the gods in the Ennead had changed subtly, with Ra becoming the only supreme god, and the rest of the gods, regardless of age, were all under Seth, and Seth became the king of the Ennead. Not only that, but since the decree of Igut only recognized Ra as the only god, the gods of the other pantheons had also become false gods. The other gods in the Ennead, except for Ra, had also lost the title of gods and had changed their title. Amun had another way of thinking about this matter, and he even thought of his disciples calling him Ammonius, and Moses and others also seeing him as the only god. If one day he became a god beyond the realm of immortality, then his disciples who followed him on this path could also become gods, and this would be a new pantheon. So how to maintain the faith of this pantheon without the collapse of conflict like the Anunnaki pantheon or the Ennead pantheon? The decree of one god, issued by Pharaoh Merneptah, did provide a solution. This should not have been entirely thought up by Pharaoh out of thin air. He must have received the guidance of some oracle, and at the same time, there must be a very clear practical motive. If it really had something to do with the oracle, the gods would not do inexplicable things, so it must have symbolized something. Unfortunately, this was not something that Amun could understand at the moment, and even Schrödinger could not explain it. The new pharaoh succeeded the throne. In addition to issuing the oracle and the latest national decree, the first specific message turned out to be directed at the supreme general of the empire, Amun, who lived in seclusion in his fief. Amun inexplicably received another reward, and to the west of his existing territory, Pharaoh gave him another fief. This kind of reward did not make much sense. The empire of Igut had a vast territory, and many of the unirrigated wilderness was not suitable for people to live in, nor was it worth using a large population to develop. West of Amun's territory, beyond the river valley, was an uninhabited wilderness since ancient times, and beyond Mount Horeb was the desert. Chapter 170. 154. The River of Blood. Supreme General Amun originally had 5 titles, but now one was cut down to 4. The original first title, the Blessing of the Great God Horus, disappeared, and the other title, Inherit the Glory of an Ra, was raised to the top and changed to Radiate the Glory of an Ra. This change was natural, because Horus had not only lost his status as the king of Igut, but he also no longer had the title of a god, and an Ra had become the only supreme god by law. The monotheistic reform of Merneptah first took the title of the famous supreme general of the empire, Amun, as a test and a declaration. Amun could not say anything more than thanks for the reward, and the ministers of Igut also knew the direction the empire was going. Although it was just a change in the title of the supreme general, its practical role was very important. Amun's achievements and glory were obtained on the battlefield, and he enjoyed a high reputation among the people. There was also a rumor that it was because of the protection of an RA that the NRA Legion was able to achieve a miraculous victory on the battlefield. The defeat of the Horus Legion, the most elite force of the kingdom, naturally symbolized the injury and retirement of Horus. The legions of the empire were named after the gods, and naturally, there was another meaning. The soldiers believed that the name of the legion was the guardian god on the battlefield. While the Horus Legion lost the first battle and was almost wiped out, the NRA Legion, which had just been formed from a miscellaneous army, repeatedly made great contributions and saved the Empire of Igut from the fate of defeat. Once this rumor was spread, the impact on the people was indeed considerable, and it was also adding fuel to the monotheistic reform of Merneptah Pharaoh. Even if the gods had a divine realm, to turn it into a true realm of divine power, they still needed true faith and offerings. The establishment of a monotheistic system required a corresponding social foundation, and only then could Seth enjoy the status of a true god in the name of an RA. After Amon wrote back to thank Pharaoh for the reward, Merneptah issued a series of new decrees requiring the city-states to replace the chief god worshipped in their shrines with Ra. The other gods, including Horus, did not cancel the sacrifice, but they had to be ranked after Seth. At the same time, he built a magnificent shrine of Ra in Hillmore and made Hillmore the new capital of the empire. Merneptah's monotheistic reform also had a very practical significance in the secular world of the Empire of Igut, as it concentrated and strengthened the rule of the monarchy. After going through a war that mobilized the whole nation, the conflicts between the various factions within the empire became more and more obvious, especially the conflicts between the emerging nobles and the aristocrats that had existed for thousands of years. Lazith II's death was too sudden, and Merneptah's position after succeeding the throne was not stable. He was not the eldest son of Lazith II, but the luckiest of the princes, who ascended the throne with the support of powerful ministers. Much of the power of the Empire of Igut was in the hands of the traditional aristocrats represented by the clergy groups, and Merneptah's reform was equivalent to centralization of power. There was a certain difference between the concept of the clergy groups and the concept of the mages. Supreme mages like Maria and George did not belong to this group, but the aristocracy that had risen in recent years. People like Rod-Dick, although not a mage himself, were still the chief priest of the Cape States, holding local military and political power for generations. He was a typical representative of this group. For example, the Ramos family, from which Nero came, was also a member of the clergy groups, and Amon had a strong conflict with this family. If personal factors aside, this was also one of the inevitable contradictions caused by the rise of the new forces represented by Amon. When the position of the royal power was unstable, it was easy for the power to be controlled by the local aristocratic groups. The change in the Ennead divine clan was an opportunity, and Merneptah took the opportunity to carry out the monotheistic reform, which was also a move to weaken the various conflicting forces in the country and strengthen the centralization of power. Changing his own name and establishing a new king were the most important symbols. Merneptah did not touch the temple of Isis in Montefiore for the time being, but according to the oracle and decree, the goddess Isis had also become an angel. Pharaoh gave this angel a special title of Our Lady of Isis, and also gave the original guardian of Isis, Saint Maria, a new title, Guardian of the Angels. The temple of Isis was still dedicated to the Our Lady of Isis, but the most important east and west halls on both sides of the main shrine were rebuilt. The east side, where the sun rose, was dedicated to Ra, while the west side was dedicated to the angels led by Seth. In fact, this was Seth's shrine, and the angels behind it were just a foil to him. As Amon expected, he soon received a warrant from Pharaoh from the city of Herak, summoning the craftsmen of Duk to go to Hillmore to build the main shrine for Ra. Supreme General Amon's first title was Glory to Ra, and he had no reason to refuse such a trivial matter. Otherwise, it would be disrespectful to the gods. Pharaoh ordered the cities to recruit craftsmen, and specifically mentioned the miners of Duk. If Lazith II had not died, and nothing had happened to the Ennead divine clan, after Amon's rampage in Montefiore, most people would not deliberately find fault with him, unless there was conclusive evidence that the Supreme General had committed a serious crime. But now everything had changed, and the power structure of the empire was being reorganized. Prime Minister Joseph was the strongest supporter of the new pharaoh's monotheistic reform, and perhaps he was the one who told Pharaoh where the best craftsmen on the continent were. Even if the Prime Minister did not say it, Pharaoh himself would have made Amon state his position, as this was both the will of the gods and the direction of the empire's national policy. Amon said apologetically to the emissary of Herak, "I could not have predicted what would happen today. That group of craftsmen has been sent to the territory of the plains of Duk." The emissary said, "This is an order from Pharaoh, and it must be carried out. His Majesty has just awarded you a large territory, but it is only for the requisition of a few dozen slaves. This is the most important matter of the empire at present. Supreme General should recall those slaves immediately." Amon nodded and said, "I will send my guards to recall them immediately." The emissary said, "Thank you, Supreme General. I will wait for news in your territory." John crossed the Nile River with a group of guards and chased Moses and the others along the official road. 2 days later, he returned and reported to Amon with a terrified expression, "Supreme General, it's not good. Your slaves have abandoned their carriages and escaped. We found their abandoned carriages on the official road by the river, as well as their footprints into the mountains and forests. The mountains are too desolate. We have searched all day but have not found them." Amon slapped the table and said, "What? They dared to escape? Continue to search. When you find them, bring them directly to Herak." Then he said to the emissary, "I'm really sorry. Those slaves have escaped. Please report to Pharaoh truthfully. I am willing to donate a large sum of money to the empire for the construction of the shrine of our slaves escaped from time to time, and the facts were clear." Supreme General Amon did not lie. He was also a victim, and Amon's donation was not empty talk. He took out the equivalent of 1,000 parangons as a tribute, which was far more than the value of dozens of ordinary slaves. The emissary did not know the inside story and thought that he had completed his mission perfectly. Although the Supreme General's slave had escaped, he had paid 1,000 parangons for it. So, after comforting Amon, he returned to the city of Herak and reported the situation to the capital. Unexpectedly, when Pharaoh saw the report, he attached great importance to it and immediately sent an order to reward Supreme General Amon with 200 slaves in recognition of his generous donation to the shrine of Ra, and at the same time to compensate him for the loss of his slaves' escape. Pharaoh also ordered the city-states of the country to assist the Supreme General in recovering the escaped slaves, and specifically emphasized the importance of these craftsmen in the divine prophecy. Amon frowned after receiving the order. Merneptah's move was unusual. It was not as simple as summoning craftsmen, but he wanted this group of people. He actually personally ordered the city-states all over the country for the sake of dozens of escaped slaves. But Pharaoh could not punish the Supreme General himself on the surface. Amon's slaves had escaped, and he had suffered losses, not to mention that he had donated a large sum of money. In the face of such kindness from the empire's Pharaoh, Supreme General Amon was also very grateful and denounced John and the other incompetent personal guards in his territory. In anger, he dismissed John from his post as the captain of the guards and wanted to drive him back to Montefiore. John pleaded, "Supreme General, please give me a chance to redeem myself. Although you have dismissed me from my post as the captain of the guards, I still need to make up for my mistakes." Amon nodded and said, "John, you have nothing to do with me anymore. Since you have the desire to help me, for the sake of Pharaoh, I will give you a warrant. You will lead all my guards to search along the official road. Even if you have to chase them out of the borders of Igut, you must find them." John prostrated and bowed. "Thank you, Supreme General. If I can't find them, I will definitely not come to see you." John was dismissed from his post by Amon, and in order to redeem himself, he asked the Supreme General to let him continue to lead his guards to search for the escaped slaves. This was all voluntary, and it looked like he was carrying out Pharaoh's orders. In fact, before this, Amon had privately asked John, "For the sake of dozens of escaped slaves, Pharaoh has issued an order to all the cities in the country. This is not an ordinary action. It seems that I will have to leave Igut sooner or later. After I leave, what will you do? John replied without thinking, Of course I will continue to follow Ammonius and bring Mizphi with me to follow you. Ammon smiled, I'm afraid it will be difficult to leave when the time comes. I will give you two choices now. One is to dismiss you from your post as the captain of the guards, and you will no longer have anything to do with me. You can return to Montefiore and continue to be an unemployed general. The second choice is still to dismiss you from your post, but give you a chance to go to where I am going. John, of course it is the second choice. To tell you the truth, all your guards have also sworn to follow you to the death. If you leave Igut, their fates will be very miserable. Supreme General, please consider it. Ammon nodded. You are very thoughtful, then I will let you take all of them and leave. Ammon asked John to lead all his guards to chase after the escaped slaves along the official road. It was nothing more than giving them a chance to leave the borders of Igut and head to the plains of Duk. Supreme General Ammon had really dismissed all the people around him. His clansmen had all fled, Medanzo and Link had also left, and now even John had left. He did not even leave a single guard behind. He only had the servants of the territory by his side, which was equivalent to living alone in such a huge and unfamiliar territory, but he seemed very calm. Ammon had thought it through very clearly. If Pharaoh really wanted to harm him, he could leave at any time, but the people around him would definitely be implicated, so it was better to prepare early. He was now a supreme general without an army, with only a cat by his side to keep him company. Ammon did not want to take the initiative to commit treason. If he was convicted of this crime, too many people would be implicated, including his former subordinates and the lords who had recommended him. Moreover, after John left, Ammon had already begun to undo the seal on Schrödinger, and there was no time or energy to deal with other things. But the importance that the pharaohs of Igut attached to the pursuit of the Dushians was far beyond ordinary people's expectations. Behind Pharaoh's orders, there was even the shadow of the gods. Moses led his clansmen along the barren mountains on the east bank of the Nile River, through the inaccessible dense forest, from the city of Heliot to the territory of the city of Bubas. Here, the official road turned east, and they had to cross the official road into another mountainous area to avoid being tracked. Moses led his clansmen to hide in the mountains, wanting to wait until late at night when the official road was deserted. However, at night he heard the voice of the oracle again. Medanzo told him that they could not leave at night, and that they had to wait until dawn. Sure enough, that night, several groups of the city guards passed by on the official road with torches in their hands. If they saw Moses and the others, they would not be able to escape. At dawn, Moses heard Medanzo's voice again. You can go now. Moses woke up his sleeping clansmen, quietly went to the official road, and walked along the main road for a distance. This place was far from the town, and the nearby farms were still in deep sleep. There was a cloud in the sky that always hid them. They took the risk to walk through this densely populated open area, and entered another desolate mountainous area. Finally, they breathed a sigh of relief. They had been trudging through the hills full of bushes for several days, and in many places they had to cut down thorns to make a path. Everyone was carrying heavy loads, and even the strongest miners were tired. In the afternoon, they came to a river, a tributary of the Nile River, and an important water source for irrigating the land near the city of Bubas. Moses ordered everyone to stop and rest, and took out utensils to make a fire to cook. They set up a stove and gathered firewood. Moses ordered 6 of the 12 judges to perform magic to prevent the smoke from the fire from rising, so as not to be discovered. As soon as the fire was lit, the clansmen sent to fetch water from the river stumbled back and reported, "Oh no, there was a terrible miracle. The river has turned into blood." Chapter 171. 155. God's punishment. Moses said with a sullen face, "It is because of the guidance of God that we can safely pass through the dangerous area and arrive here. If a changed river can shake our faith, how can we be worthy of God's help? How can we go through all the hardships to return to our homeland?" No one dared to drink the river. Moses raised his iron staff and used water elemental magic to condense the dew on the grass. He ordered his people to continue cooking. While they were cooking, Medanzo and Link hid in a secluded place and whispered. Link said, "Did you see that? Someone used a very clever sensory reversal spell to change the color and smell of the river to scare Moses and his people away." Medanzo frowned and said, "If they don't cross the river, they will have to go back to the main road and go from the east. They will definitely be discovered. This is the purpose of the person who did this. Who could it be?" Link stroked his staff and said, "Ammonius sent John and his guards to leave Igut first. When John passed by, he passed on Ammonius' instructions. Is this what Ammonius is warning us about?" Ammon ordered John to lead 36 guards and leave Igut first. They rode along the main road in the name of pursuing fugitive slaves. Of course, they were much faster than Moses and his people. They had already surpassed them the day before. John found Medanzo and Link in the middle of the night and told them about Ammon's latest plan. Besides letting these two outstanding disciples verify the power of origin that they had just learned, he also told them to pay attention to a few other things. Moses and his people had become fugitives. Pharaoh had ordered all the cities in the country to put them on the wanted list. The difficulties they would face along the way were not only limited to the difficulties they would face. The gods of Egypt were likely to use various means to stop them. The real gods would not directly attack Moses and the others, but they would use various means to create obstacles. To shake their faith, to make them feel fear and discouragement, to lose courage, confidence, and hope. If the Dushians no longer believed that they could succeed and gave up on the mission, then the Egyptian gods would have succeeded. Medanzo and Link were secretly trying to resolve these obstacles and encourage Moses and the others not to give up. If the gods' obstruction and intimidation did not succeed, they would probably send messengers to threaten Moses and the others. The messengers of the gods should also be the gods in the legend of Igut, but Ammon told Medanzo and Link that those messengers were not real gods who transcended eternal life. They were nothing more than masters of the secret of becoming gods like them and trained in the power of unity. In this case, Medanzo and Link needed to take action, but there was no need to fight to the death. They could make various agreements to hold them back and let Moses and the others pass safely. If they were really not a match for the Dushians, Ammon would not force them to do their best. If these two obstacles could not stop the Dushians, the gods might directly attract the pursuers of Igut, and then they would have to fight directly. It was unrealistic for Medanzo, Link, and Moses to defeat the Igut army, but it was also impossible for the Igut army to gather in one place and wait for them. They had to avoid encountering a large number of troops as much as possible. Now that the river had turned into blood and was blocking the way of Moses and the others, even if it could not scare them away, it could make them take a detour. It seemed that Ammon's prophecy had come true. Medanzo curled the corner of his mouth and said, "This little trick is not difficult for us. If Moses and the others want to persist, we will help them cross the river." Link said worriedly, "It is not a big problem for now, but this is just the beginning. I wonder what else Moses and the others will encounter?" Medanzo, Ammonius said to let them choose for themselves. "As long as they do not give up, we will provide help." Link reminded again, if the punishment of the gods of Igut does not scare away Moses and the others, it is likely that they will send messengers to directly stop them. I wonder if the two of us are a match for them? Medanzo patted Link on the shoulder and said with a smile, "Don't forget, we are also messengers of the gods. Who is afraid of who? Ammonius has finally taught us the power of origin, the true inseparable body. We used to practice the power of two sides, but we still lacked a lot of methods, but now we have mastered it. It is not without its benefits, at least our magic power is much stronger than those of the same level. I have even fought with Enkidu on the battlefield, that is a guy who dares to kill even the gods. Why would I be afraid of the messengers of the gods? Since Ammonius asked us to carry out this task, we must also have confidence." Link laughed. "It is such a big thing. How come it is not a difficult thing when it comes to you?" Medanzo said proudly, "Of course, when Ammonius attacked Hittite and captured the king alive, why did he only bring me?" That night, the worried Moses was praying to the gods when he heard the voice of the messenger. "Moses, when the light appears on the horizon and the morning mist rises from the forest, lead your people to cross the river." Moses quickly got up and found the 12 judges and instructed, "The messengers of the gods told me that when the morning mist rises, we can cross the river in front of us. Let the people get ready immediately." Someone asked, "Now everyone is very afraid, thinking that it is the punishment of the gods of Igut, and they dare not go to the river again. What should we do?" Moses replied, "Tell them that it is the path guided by the gods. We only believe in our gods. If they do not want to go, they can turn back. I am willing to be the first to cross the river." When the light appeared on the horizon, there was a faint morning mist floating in the forest. Moses gathered his people and walked to the river, and the mist slowly followed them. The rushing river was still red and exuded the smell of blood, but the morning mist floated out of the forest like a thin blanket on the river. Gradually, the white mist on the river became thicker and thicker, and under the cover of the morning mist in the forest, it turned into the shape of a pontoon bridge. Moses waved his staff and said, "This is the path that the gods have guided us to cross the river. As long as the faith in our hearts is firm, we can walk to the other side. Only one person can cross at a time." Everyone looked at the condensed mist, and many people did not dare to go over. How could they step on the mist? If they stepped on it, wouldn't they fall into the river? Just as Moses was about to go, a clansman said, "Moses, I know that the gods have given you strength, but we don't. How can we cross the water? Do you want to leave us?" Moses stopped and said, "Everyone can cross. Since you said so, I will be the last to cross. Who will go first?" His servant Joshua lifted the corner of his robe and was ready to cross the bridge. The youngest child of the clansmen, David, suddenly came out and said, "My faith in going home has never wavered. I will go first." Then he ran over. His father, Jonah, just shouted, "David, be careful." The child had already disappeared into the thick mist. Only one person could cross at a time. This was the order of the gods. Everyone waited anxiously. After a while, David's voice came from the other side, "I have crossed, it will be fine. This bridge is amazing, it is like stepping on the clouds." The people breathed a sigh of relief when they heard David's words. One by one, they crossed the magical bridge. Moses was the last to reach the other side. Everyone looked back. The sun was shining through the gaps in the treetops. The mist had dissipated, and the river was clear again. The people smiled. They had crossed the river. Link unfolded the crystal shuttle and spread it on the surface of the river to guide the Dushians across. The crystal shuttle could still change in such a way, which showed that his method of controlling the artifact had become more refined than before. Amon's new understanding of the power of inseparability was fundamentally to forget the concept of the so-called body arts or magic arts. To control the crystal shuttle, one had to achieve at least the 7th level. But Link realized that if the crystal shuttle was turned into a mist bridge, in fact, the 4th level was enough. It was not that the power was more powerful, but the way of using it was different. Medanzo stood guard at the side, in case of any accidents during the crossing. Only when everyone had crossed the river did the two quietly put away the shuttle and leave. Medanzo smiled at Link. "That boy named David is really good." He did not panic at all when he stepped on the transmogrified shuttle for the first time at such a young age. Although he was full of questions, his steps were very steady. His aptitude is rare. Moses awakened the power of two sides for the people. Why did he miss out? Link replied, "I also paid attention to this boy. He is still too young, only 14 this year. According to the tradition of Duk, one can only learn the skills of mining at the age of 16. It is also a good foundation for practicing the power of two sides. This boy has not learned it yet, so Moses did not awaken his power. From what you said, you seem to be very interested in this boy." Medanzo nodded, "I am very optimistic about him. It is indeed not suitable for him to learn the skills of mining at such a young age. Without a mature bloodline, it is difficult to withstand the impact of the power. Only a few talented people are exceptions. Since Ammonius has imparted his latest insights to you and me, I also want to try taking in a disciple to awaken David's power. He has not learned any magic or body arts, and has no prejudices in his heart. It is suitable for him to start from scratch." Link glanced at him and said, "You really like to be in the limelight." Ammonius wanted John to try the awakening ceremony, starting with Ms. Phi. "But you were the first to get the itch and chose this David." Medanzo said thoughtfully, "I have experienced all kinds of awakening ceremonies. The first was in the capital of Babylon, where I experienced the ceremony to awaken the bloodline of warriors. Later, in your tribe, Ammonius awakened the power of two sides for me. After saving Princess Sicila and returning to Babylon, Her Highness, in order to reward me, ordered people to hold a second awakening ceremony for me. There are so many complicated ceremonies, but Ammonius only came up with a name to include all of them. It is called the Awakening of Power." Link sighed. Ammonius is really amazing to be able to point out the origin. But the awakening of power is not easy to succeed. For those who do not have the aptitude, they can still use the original ceremonies to achieve limited achievements. Even if they know the secret of becoming a god, most people will not be able to become a god. It is just a matter of distance. But as long as one has worked hard in life, life is not a pity. Moses and the rest followed the wilderness of the Nile Valley, bypassing the main city of Bubas, and entered the territory of Danis. Further ahead was the estuary of the Nile River. This river was divided into many thin streams that spread out in a fan shape, forming a delta that was flooded during the season. They walked along the wetlands of the triangle for a few more days, and when they were not far from the coastline, they turned east and continued walking. They did not encounter any more accidents along the way, and the tribesmen heaved a sigh of relief. The weather was relatively humid, and when they camped at night, Moses ordered the tribesmen to set up tents and be careful not to catch a cold. That night, when everyone was sleeping soundly, they suddenly heard a scream of horror, which was followed by a cacophony of screams. Everyone woke up and ran out of their tents in panic. It turned out that countless frogs had climbed ashore from the nearby streams and got into the tents, beds, utensils, and even people's clothes. How did these frogs appear? Even the few judges who were on guard at night did not notice. Everyone was awakened by the frogs and jumped out of their bedding in fear. Some people even took out a few frogs from their crotches and threw them out. The camp was a little quiet, and countless frogs began to croak. The croaking noise made people dizzy, and they could not even hear each other clearly. One or two frogs were not scary, but countless frogs appeared densely, jumping everywhere, and the croaking of the frogs echoed in the wilderness. This was a terrifying scene that made people's scalps tingle. Moses slammed his cane on the ground, and an invisible force drowned out the croaking of the frogs. He shouted to the tribesmen, "What are you panicking for? Even the frogs are like this. What will you do if you encounter a real enemy? Pack up and continue moving out." This section of the road was relatively wet and muddy. There were many small streams along the way, and there were large and small pools everywhere. No one knew where so many frogs came from, but they kept croaking loudly, making people feel uneasy. Moses had the 12 judges raise their iron staves and take turns to open the way, driving away the swarm of frogs in front of them. But every night when they were camping, frogs would constantly jump out of the trees and cracks in the rocks. These little things were slippery, and they would sneak into the cups they drank, the blankets they slept in, and the clothes they wore. It was simply impossible to guard against. The 12 judges tried their best to drive them away, but there were just too many frogs. Although they did not hurt anyone, they disturbed everyone and made it impossible for them to rest. After a few days, everyone was exhausted. This kind of torture was really unbearable. The further they went, the more the disturbance from the frogs became, as if it would never stop. The tribesmen were suffering unspeakably. Of course, Medanzo and Link also noticed, and the two secretly discussed what to do. Link said, "In the legends of Igut, there is a frog goddess called Hecate, who is said to be a servant of Seth. Could it be that she did it?" Chapter 172. 156, Frog Goddess Hecate. Link frowned. Her purpose is clear, that is to disturb Moses and the others. Frogs don't bite, but they can annoy people to death until they are exhausted and can't hold on any longer. Sooner or later, they will panic and stop moving forward. No one can withstand endless torture and wear down their courage and perseverance bit by bit. If they break down, Seth will have succeeded. Madanzo spat. What a ruthless method, driving so many frogs out to annoy me. I can't even find an opponent to fight. There are too many frogs, there's no end to them. Link said solemnly, if Frog Goddess Hecate doesn't show up, we don't have to show up either. This is a test for Moses and the others, and they must overcome this difficulty. As long as they cross the Nile River and reach a dry area, Hecate naturally won't be able to drive so many frogs. At the current speed, I'm afraid it will take a few more days. Madanzo said, this is a test of faith and will. It depends on how strong their will is and whether they can persist in this kind of environment. I found that David is really a good child, he eats and sleeps well. The calmer a person is, the less likely they are to be disturbed by this kind of torture. Link smiled. The frogs are helping you to test people, are you going to guide that child in the next few days? Madanzo smiled. I've never eaten frogs since I was a child, but when I came to your tribe, I learned that frogs can also be eaten, and they are so delicious. Now I'm craving them again. Panic and unease gradually spread among the tribesmen, and the continuous torture caused them to fall into a trance. Some people said that this was a punishment from the gods of Igut, but where was their god, Ah? The 12 judges tried their best but could not completely drive away the ubiquitous frogs. It was a bit like the scene when Amon and Madanzo encountered scorpions in the desert. Many people could not walk anymore and said to Moses, we are not complaining, most of us are strong, but we can't take it and can't rest. Is this the punishment from the gods of Igut? Why do they torture us like this? Take us away from the forest and those pools. Moses advised, we can't leave the forest yet, or we'll be discovered by our pursuers. This is exactly what the evil god Igut wants to achieve. All of you are calling out to Allah, but have you ever thought about what you should do? Don't stop. Leave the delta wetlands as soon as possible. The longer you stay here, the more torture you'll suffer. Gather round me, all of you, and let me raise my staff to bless you, and wash away your weariness and restlessness. Moses and his people did not stop. Although they were exhausted, they still followed the path that God had pointed out. On this day, David was sleeping in the midst of the croaking of the frogs. Suddenly, he heard a voice in his mind, David, child of Duk, the messenger of the gods is calling you. Please leave the tent quietly and go to the place where the frogs are the loudest. No one will find you. David was really brave. For the past few days, everyone had been panicking when they heard the croaking of the frogs, but he dared to enter the forest where the frogs were the loudest in the middle of the night. The judges on night watch were also tired and did not notice David sneaking out of the tent. David walked through the dense forest. The croaking of the frogs suddenly quieted down, as if they had retreated to a place far away. Then he saw a fire beside a stream, and a man sitting beside the fire. This person was wearing a cloak that covered his face. He was holding a thin and long golden weaving shuttle in his hand. A bunch of freshly washed and peeled frogs were skewered on the golden weaving shuttle. The frogs were being roasted on the fire with a sizzling sound. His other hand was sprinkling salt on them. The air was filled with the fragrance of humans. David was shocked and asked, "Who are you? Why are you roasting frogs? Can they be eaten?" Madanzo asked, "First tell me who you are and why you are here." David replied, "I am David Solomon, a warrior of the town of Duk. Under the guidance of our God, I have completed my vow to return to my hometown. The messenger of God Allah has summoned me." Madanzo stood up and said with a smile, "I am the messenger of God. These frogs have tortured you for so many days. Do you dare to eat them?" David knelt down and said, "As long as you eat them, I will eat them." Madanzo tore off a frog and ate it happily under the shadow of the cloak. Then he handed the golden weaving shuttle in his hand to David. "Child, are you hungry? The taste is very good." David reached out and took down a roasted frog. He gently bit off a piece and tasted it. Then he stuffed the whole string of frogs into his stomach and ate with relish. Madanzo looked at him with a smile. When he finished eating, he asked, "Is it delicious?" David nodded and said, "Delicious, very delicious." Madanzo asked again, "Are you still afraid of them?" David shook his head and said, "No, I have never been afraid. Messenger of God, did you summon me here to treat me to such a delicious meal and tell me that I don't have to be afraid of frogs?" Medanzo smiled and said, "Yes, but I have something else to do. This is our little secret. Don't tell anyone else." From that day on, Medanzo awakened David's power, but he never revealed his face. He only said that he was the messenger of God. David asked him what kind of power it was. Medanzo replied that it was the power of faith, which required people to practice with firm faith. David then asked Medanzo about the frogs. Medanzo explained, "Those are the messengers sent by the evil god Igut. They want to stop the Dushians and shake your faith." David pleaded, "Messenger of God, could you please drive those frogs away?" Medanzo shook his head and said, "The frogs live in this wetland. You will encounter them when you pass by. This is a difficulty that you have to overcome. If the messenger of the evil god acts directly, the messenger of God will stop him. But you can't expect to get everything from God without paying anything. Including the power I taught you today, it is also given by God, but you can only practice on your own." The next day, when David returned to the camp, his father Jonah ran to him and hugged him, saying, "Son, where have you been? Everyone is worried. If I don't see you soon, Lord Moses will send people to find you." David raised a branch in his hand, on which there was a string of cleaned frogs. He said, "I'm going to find something to eat. Roast them on the fire and sprinkle some salt. They taste really good." The people around him said in horror, "David, how can you eat such things? They are sent by the demons to torture us. Be careful or you will be poisoned." David smiled and said, "I already ate them last night. They were delicious. What are you afraid of?" Moses walked over and patted David's head, saying, "You are very brave and did a good job. If no one wants to eat them, you can eat them yourself." After walking like this for another 5 days, the group finally left the edge of the wetland of the Nile River Triangle. In front of them were rolling dry hills with grass and shrubs, and the croaking of the frogs finally faded away. Link and Medanzo stood on a treetop and watched Moses and the others walk into the area where there were no frogs. Suddenly, they felt a powerful force behind them. Link whispered, "Hecate has appeared, and she is in the jungle. Is she going to attack us directly?" Medanzo pulled out the key of destiny from thin air, and with a wave of his hand, he put on the scorpion shell armor. He turned around and said with a cold face, "My hands are also itching. I have been waiting impatiently for a long time." Link also turned around and quietly reminded, "Be careful, this Hecate stealth magic is better than ours. We have not been able to find his hiding place even after so many days." Medanzo sneered, "Of course, there are frogs everywhere. He can completely hide his aura. I suspect that he is a mutant frog demon, just like Elmar, who is born with the ability to sneak around in the environment he grew up in. If Elmar hides in the swamp and hides his aura, it will be difficult for us to find him. But if he wants to attack us, the situation will be different." As he spoke, countless water droplets floated up from the leaves, the puddles, and the nearby streams into the air. The droplets were like transparent pearls that reflected a bright light under the sunlight. It was a beautiful sight. A person walked out from the grass, and from the looks of it, it was a young man. This person was wearing a green robe covered with dark brown stripes. His eyes were a little round and bulging, but he could be considered handsome. However, there were a few brownish-green stripes on his cheeks and forehead, as if they were painted with oil. They reflected a faint luster, appearing strange and mysterious. As soon as this person appeared, the floating water droplets began to glow and gradually elongated in the air, turning into transparent arrows. Countless water arrows were ready to be fired, all aimed at Medanzo and Link. Medanzo pointed at the person with the key of destiny and asked, "Is this Hecate?" The newcomer was slightly startled. "So you know me? Since you know it's me, why don't you put down your weapons and salute me?" Medanzo narrowed his eyes and said, "Why? Lord Frog Angel, you have been the one causing trouble for the past few days, right? What makes you think that we will put down our weapons and salute you? To be honest, we don't know you, and we don't want to know you. We just thought of you when we saw those frogs. Hecate also narrowed her eyes. Her pupils were also greenish-brown, like vertical slits on her eyeballs. You are indeed not ordinary mortals. Not only are you not panicking after seeing the legendary Hecate, you even dare to speak like this? Madanzo shrugged. I have seen those so-called gods who have transcended eternal life, but they are not my gods, let alone you. Who ordered you to come here, and why are you disturbing those suffering tribesmen? Hecate's figure was submerged in a sea of transparent water arrows. The arrows that filled the sky were filled with power, but in the end, they were not fired. She looked at Madanzo, then at Link, and shouted with slight surprise, Are you the disciples of the Scorpion King Jurishri? No wonder you obtained the power bestowed by the gods. But this is the Igut, and I am the emissary of Seth, the king of angels. How dare you stop me? Link did not speak, but he was not idle either. At the same time that the water droplets in the forest turned into arrows, a bow floated in front of him. The bowstring was pulled and turned into a series of shadows, turning into many strings. The bow looked like a harp. Dozens of arrows flew out, densely packed on the bowstring. They were arrows made from the stinger of a giant mutant scorpion. He and Madanzo were also wearing scorpion shell armor, so it was no wonder that Hecate would misunderstand. Madanzo shook his head. Whose emissary we are has nothing to do with you, and whose emissary you are also has nothing to do with us. Those poor people have not done anything wrong, and have never offended you, so why are you torturing them? Hecate apparently misunderstood Madanzo's words as a tacit agreement, and showed a look of contempt. The Scorpion King Jurishri himself has not yet obtained the qualification to join the Anunnaki divine clan, and it is even more impossible for you to follow him. A demigod exiled in the desert, who has no divine clan to rely on, sent an emissary here to make an enemy of me. Don't you think it's ridiculous? I see that the two of you have some achievements. Put down your weapons and swear to follow me, and I can consider introducing you to the Angel King Seth, and perhaps you will have a chance to join the Ennead. Please kneel and thank me. The background of his words was very complicated. When the War of the Gods broke out in the Anunnaki divine clan, Tiamat and Kingu were on the losing side, while Enlil and Marduk were on the winning side. Legend had it that Tiamat created 9 kinds of monsters in the war, including the 9-headed snake Humbaba, the human-faced scorpion Jurishri, and the giant lion Yugalu. These 9 kinds of monsters were naturally defeated, some were killed, some were subdued, and some went into exile. These monsters were very powerful, and after Enlil and the others won, they did not want to pay a huge price to kill them all. It would be best if they could subdue them for their own use, or if they could make them swear not to be enemies again, so that they would not have to fight so hard. Humbaba was subdued by Enlil and became the guardian of the divine realm, so he could be considered to have joined the Anunnaki divine clan. The human-faced scorpion Jurishri was forced to promise that he would no longer be enemies with Enlil and the others, but he also did not surrender to them, so he was exiled to the desert and lost the right to be introduced into the Anunnaki divine clan, while he himself became known as the Scorpion King. After the war, both Marduk and Enlil took a fancy to him and allowed him to join the Anunnaki divine clan. But Yugalu fell in love with the goddess Murin, and as a result, because of a well-known curse, he eventually left in sadness and became the Flowing Lion King. Jurishri was very powerful, but he was an exiled demigod, and he was neither a god who transcended eternal life nor could he be accepted by the divine clan. In the eyes of the official members of the divine clan, his emissary was certainly following the wrong person. Hecate gave Madanzo and Link a chance to put down their weapons and swear to follow her, and she could introduce them to Seth, and perhaps they could be introduced into the Ennead divine clan. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.